Chapter 1873. This was undoubtedly a happy problem. There were many factions in the Vientiane Sea, but there were only so many spiritual islands. Many factions did not have a place to settle down and could only wander around. If they were lucky, they could find a deserted island to settle down temporarily. If they were unlucky, they would be homeless. However, when it came to the Three-World Island, the situation was different. Back then, they conquered Baiyu and secretly gave it to Four Corner Island. Now that they had conquered Zishan, they could not even take it. We can't take Zishan. We can confirm this, right? Tang Jun looked at everyone. Everyone nodded. Actually, even if Tang Jun did not mention this, Luan Xiao would have gathered Yu Yao to discuss how to deal with Zishan. Now, it seemed like they had agreed not to take Zishan. If we don't want Zishan, how should we deal with it? He Baichuan asked. It was not easy to conquer such a top-grade spiritual island. They could not just lose it. If they did, someone would definitely come and take it. It was a great benefit. Auction. Yin Miao suggested, just like how we auctioned off Baiyu. We should be able to sell it for a good price. Although this method works, I am afraid no one would dare to take it, Luan Xiao said. After all, Zishan was a spiritual island occupied by a top-grade faction. Although it had been conquered by the Three-World Island, it was not something that anyone could covet. This top-grade spiritual island was different from Baiyu. Back then, countless factions fought over Baiyu and competed with each other during the auction. However, no one dared to take over Zishan. This was because once they did, they would definitely stand against Zishan. If Zishan lost her spiritual island, she would definitely think of a way to get it back. Take Four Corner Island for example. The Baiyu Galaxy had been eyeing Four Corner Island covetously. They wanted to take back control of Four Corner Island. However, Four Corner Island was not weak. The Baiyu Galaxy could not do anything. However, Zishan was different. If they did not have any backing, they would not dare to have any ideas. This might be a hot potato. Wrong. Tang Jun smiled. There are indeed people who are interested in Zishan. What news did you get? Lu Yi looked at him and asked. Tang Jun said, after you conquered Zishan, someone sent a message saying that they want to take over Zishan. They want us to offer a reasonable price. There are not many people, but there are 4 or 5 factions. Lu Yi asked curiously, who is so bold? Tang Jun said, in a place without rules, I'm afraid no one would dare to disregard Zishan's reputation. However, this is the Wanxiang Sea after all. Although Zishan's reputation is great, the rule that only the 5 registered Yu Yao are qualified to participate in the Battle of the Spiritual Islands means that Zishan won't cause too much trouble in the vast Wanxiang Sea. After those forces take over Zishan, as long as they properly fortify their defenses, it won't be that easy for Zishan to deploy troops to take them down. As long as they can hold on for a period of time and wait for the defensive formation to become more stable, they will be able to gain a firm foothold. Therefore, this has nothing to do with courage. Zishan is indeed a top-level domain, but the universe is vast. Some large domains have very strong foundations. Lu Yi understood. It was not that those who had secretly contacted Tang Jun and wanted to stay in Zishan were not unafraid of Zishan. It was just that the rules of the Wanxiang Sea had greatly restricted Zishan. Even if Zishan had great strength, there was a limit to what it could do on the Wanxiang Sea. Therefore it was worth the risk. Moreover, they had a certain level of confidence. If they missed this opportunity, they might not be able to wait for the next opportunity in their lifetime. Naturally, someone would take action. Although 4 or 5 isn't much, we should be able to sell it for a good price. He Baichuan nodded. We can sell it. Wan Xiao pondered for a moment. She was also tempted. Under the premise that the cultivators of the 3 realms could not take over Zishan, selling it was indeed the only choice. Everyone turned to look at Lu Yi. Although Lu Yi was only the 3rd island master in name, he had played a decisive role in the development of the 3 realms island over the years. He was also the one who led and resolved all the difficulties that the island faced. If not for him, Zishan would not have been able to take it down. Therefore it was up to him to decide what to do in the end. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi said, we definitely have to sell it. I already have a suitable buyer in mind. Moreover, I believe that they will give us a very high price. Wan Xiao was stunned. Who? She did not see Lu Yi contact anyone. How did he find a suitable buyer? Lu Yi shook his head and said, let's not talk about this first. Old Tang, you didn't rush over here just to discuss the ownership of Zishan, right? Is there something else going on here? If it was just to discuss the ownership of Zishan, it could have been delayed. However, Tang Jun had rushed over directly. There was no doubt that something was wrong. Tang Jun smiled and said, you're so smart. Since you've figured it out, I won't keep you in suspense. It's like this. Not long after you killed Lionheart outside the island of Versatility, a guest came to the Three Realms Island. It was Taoist Yu from the Ling realm. She passed by the Three Realms Island and went to see that brat Chushin. After she left, Chushin came to find me and said something. What? Yi Baichuan asked curiously. Tang Jun said, you can think of a way to sell Zixien Island back to the Zixien Demon Star. Yi Baichuan was stunned and looked confused. What kind of logic is that? It wasn't easy for us to conquer it. If we sell it back, wouldn't it be a waste of our efforts? Tang Jun nodded and said, yes, when I heard this I also had the same thought. However, what Chushin said to me was obviously Taoist Yu's advice. Taoist Yu is a cultivator from the Ling realm, so she can't have any direct contact with us. That's why she asked Chushin to pass on the message. After a pause, Tang Jun continued, thinking deeper, could Taoist Yu's meaning be the same as that of the Ling realm? If that's the case, then it's very profound. It was impossible to guess Ri Guang's thoughts, but no one dared to ignore it. That's why I've been thinking along the way. What's the meaning behind this? We destroyed Zixien Island and killed so many Zixien Demon Star cultivators. Even if we sell it back to them, it won't resolve this grudge. If that's the case, why should we sell it back to Zixien? Tang Jun showed a distressed expression. Yi Baichuan asked, have you thought it through? Tang Jun chuckled and did not answer. Instead he looked at Lu Yi. Who's the suitable person you're talking about? Lu Yi said calmly, Zixien Demon Star. Tang Jun pointed at him and clapped his hands. See, he's thought it through. Yi Baichuan felt a headache coming. Don't beat around the bush. Tell me, what are you guys thinking? Tang Jun smiled and said, it's very simple. If Zixien wants to sell it, then it must be sold at a high price. Of course, the few forces who are interested will not offer a low price. However, only by selling it to Zixien can it be sold at the highest price. To Zixien, buying back this spiritual island is not just about making a deal. They want to buy face. At this point, Tang Jun sighed. A top force losing a spiritual island in the Vientiane Sea is something that has never happened before. If Zixien doesn't buy back the spiritual island, they will be the only top force without a top-notch spiritual island from today onwards. They will become the subject of discussion at all times. The reputation of a top force is so precious that it can't be bought with money. Hence, by selling it to Zixien, we will have the absolute advantage. We can name whatever price we want and as much as we want. After hearing Tang Jun's explanation, Yi Baichuan was enlightened. Yes, the spiritual island had a price, but face was priceless. In order to get back the spiritual island, as long as the price offered by the Three-World Island was not too outrageous, Zixien Demon Star would accept it. Most importantly, in terms of wealth, which force could be compared to a top force? The benefits of selling it to others were definitely not as good as selling it back to Zixien Demon Star. This was the best target to sell Zixien to. Jiao Yin must have seen through this, which was why she instructed Aunt Yu to make a trip to the Three-World Island and pass on this idea to Chushin. Tang Jun did not expect Lu Yi to have the same idea as Jiao Yin. Therefore, even if he did not make this trip, Lu Yi would have already made a decision. Will Zixien buy it? Yi Baichuan asked. Tang Jun said, don't worry about that. Zixien will definitely buy it. Once the news reaches Zixien Demon Star, someone will not be able to sit still. As he spoke, he stood up and said, all right, if I knew that you had already made a decision, I would not have made this trip. You guys go ahead, I will make a move first. Tang Jun left. After a few days, the cultivators of the Three-World Island left one after another. The huge top-grade spiritual island had become an empty island without a master in an instant. Originally, Luan Xiao wanted to set up a simple defensive array here and leave some cultivators of the Three-World Island to guard it. However, she gave up after Lu Ye's persuasion. Yuan Du hated him to the core, so it was best for the Three-World Island to be more careful. They did not want to give Yuan Du any information that could be used against them. If they divided their forces to occupy Zixien, it would undoubtedly break the rule that no one force could occupy two spiritual islands on the Wanxiang Sea. At that time, Yuan Du would use this as an excuse to make a fuss. Even if he killed the cultivators of the Three-World Island, Lu Yi could only watch helplessly. The cultivators of the Three Realms retreated. Anything of value on Violet Jade Island had been taken away, with the exception of the Spirit Jade Mine. Even so, no power dared to casually occupy it. After all, if the Three Realms Island had the ability to destroy Violet Jade when it was at its peak, then they had the ability to destroy Violet Jade in its current state. No matter who came to occupy Zixien, they would definitely encounter the enmity of the Three-World Island. Once they were attacked, things would not end well. All the major forces on the 10,000 Elephant Sea were well aware of this. Therefore, although they were envious, they could only restrain themselves. The few forces that were interested in buying Zixian had been in frequent contact with Tang Jun these days. Even though Tang Jun had clearly rejected them, they still couldn't resist their enthusiasm. Recently, Lao Tang could be said to be enjoying himself every night. Although he was old, he was still strong and vigorous. He was very distressed. The fierce battle thus came to an end. The shock this battle brought to the cultivators of the Wanxiang Sea was far greater than the previous attack by the Three-World Island. This was the first top spiritual island to be conquered in the history of the Wanxiang Sea. The Three-World Island once again proved its powerful and terrifying foundation. Among them, the third island master of the Three-World Island, Lu Yi, had solidified the title of the strongest person under the sun. End of chapter. Chapter 1874. In the Three-World Island, Lu Yi and Chu Xin sat opposite each other in his bamboo house. There were a few dishes and 2 bottles of wine on the table. They were drinking and chatting happily. After retreating from Zixian yesterday, Lu Yi brought the minor constellation hall back with him. He readjusted the power of this treasure and placed it under the Three-World Island. It had only been half a month since he placed the minor constellation hall under Zixian Island. Hence, even though there was some impact on the Three-World Island, it was not significant. Many people did not even realize that there were many changes in the Three-World Island. Today, Lu Yi invited Chu Xin to a banquet. He did not pay much attention to it. The two of them ate and chatted casually. He did not even thank Chu Xin. He remembered some things and did not need to express it. Chu Xin did not mention it either. However, Lu Yi knew that Juyan's appearance on the all-encompassing island was not a coincidence. There were no such coincidences in this world. If there was anyone in this world who could invite Juyan, it would be Chu Xin. How long will it take for you to complete the constellation? Lu Yi threw a nut into his mouth and asked casually. Chu Xin chuckled. Soon, within 2 or 3 years. Ever since he came to the Three-World Island, Chu Xin had been living in seclusion. He cultivated in seclusion all year round. His talent was outstanding. In addition to the excellent cultivation environment on the Three-World Island, he did not lack cultivation resources. Hence, his cultivation progressed very quickly. Back then he was not like this. He was young and unruly and would run away from home at the slightest provocation. However, ever since he lost the matchless island, Chu Xin realized the importance of his own strength. Only then was he able to calm down and work hard. A cultivator's path of growth would always be filled with obstacles. Everyone was like that. It was these obstacles that allowed one to become more mature. Chu Xin aside, in the Three-World Island, the first batch of 9 continents constellations that came with Lu Yi had already reached the late-stage constellation realm. Their cultivation and strength had greatly improved compared to when they first came to the myriad phenomenon sea. Lu Yi nodded. I am preparing to go to the carriage bell boundary. What do you think I should bring? Juyan helped him resolve such a huge crisis. Back then, Lu Yi could not express his gratitude. Furthermore, the battle for the spiritual island was still ongoing. Hence, he immediately rushed back to Zixian Island. Now that everything was settled, it was time to pay a visit to Che Lingjie and thank Jiu Yan in person. It wouldn't be nice to go empty-handed, so Lu Yi thought that he should bring some gifts. But what could possibly pique Rizhao's interest? Lu Yi thought about it and decided that he had to consult Chu Xin on this matter. After all, no one knew his mother better than him. There's no need to bring them. Big brother, just go. When the time comes, I will accompany big brother. Chu Xin waved his hand. I need to bring them. Give me some ideas. Lu Yi insisted. Chu Xin was just being polite when he said that he didn't need to bring anything. Naturally, he couldn't really go there without bringing anything. Does Senior Juyan have any special preferences? Chu Xin scratched his head. I really don't know. I've never seen mother like anything. Think about it carefully. You're the son of Juyan after all. How could you not know what your mother likes? Chu Xin thought hard for a while and suddenly his eyes lit up. Lu Yi immediately looked at him expectantly. Why don't you find a Dao companion for my mother, big brother? My mother has been alone all her life, she should have someone by her side. The corner of Lu Ye's mouth twitched. This was really a filial son. How could he say something like that? Moreover, where could he find a Dao companion for Juyan? Juyan was Rizhao. Only Rizhao was worthy of her. Soon he felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, if Senior Juyan has been alone all her life, where did you come from? Chu Xin laughed. I was picked up by mother. Mother and I are not biological mother and son. Lu Yi couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. He had always thought that Chu Xin and Juyan were biological mother and son. Who knew that they weren't? Chu Xin definitely wouldn't joke about this kind of thing. According to her, a few decades ago when she was traveling through a certain domain, she saw me, who was still in swaddling clothes, being placed on a wooden basin. Following the river, there were jackals and wolves on both sides of the river, eyeing me covetously. If no one paid attention to me, I would either drown or be eaten by those jackals and wolves. She couldn't bear it and brought me back, taking good care of me. The origin of my name is because that domain has the word Xin, and the place where my mother found me was a small country called Chu, so my mother named me Chu Xin. Lu Yi blinked. I thought you took your father's surname. Chu Xin smiled. I don't even know who my father is. At this point, Chu Xin suddenly said, Big brother, if you insist on bringing a gift, why don't you give it to Aunt Yu? Mother probably doesn't want anything else, so she won't care about anything. However, if you give it to Aunt Yu, the effect will be the same. Lu Yi asked, Then what does Aunt Yu like? Chu Xin thought for a moment and said, From what I know, Aunt Yu has a chance of breaking through to Rizhao. The soul-refining pill should be good. Alright, a few years ago, Aunt Yu seemed to be looking for treasures that can improve the quality of her spiritual source. I wonder if she found any. When he said this, Lu Yi had a plan in mind. Indeed, for a PQ Yao like Aunt Yu, a top-grade soul-refining pill was undoubtedly a good gift. The top-grade soul-refining pill of the Three-World Island was now a signature item. In the vast Wanxiang Sea, countless PQ Yao had their eyes on it. Although it was not difficult for the island to refine this pill with the pill gourd, in theory, as long as they had enough raw materials, they could refine it without limit. However, they could not supply it without limit. Firstly, it would attract unwanted attention, and secondly, it would delay Shui Yuan's cultivation. Especially after the Three-World Island had gotten on the right track in recent years, Shui Yuan's main purpose of using the pill furnace to refine pills was to satisfy the cultivation needs of her own cultivators. As for selling them, that was secondary because the Three-World Island no longer relied on selling pills to earn spirit jades. Also, with the addition of the flower tribe, they could refine normal pills and their quality was not bad. However, if they wanted to refine top-grade pills, it would depend on luck. Therefore, there was only one way for the Three-World Island to sell top-grade soul-refining pills to the outside world: the Rainbow Chamber of Commerce's annual auction. Every time the auction was held, a large number of Yu Yao would come. Any bottle of top-grade soul-refining pills would be sold at a very high price. Every year, this was the busiest time for the Three-World Island. The pills were sold in limited quantities to the outside world, but if Lu Yi wanted them, wouldn't it be easy? He could just take whatever he wanted. As for treasures that could increase the quality of one's spiritual source, it was a bitter matter. Lu Yi had asked the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce to keep an eye out for such treasures several years ago, but there had been no news from them so far. Violet Jade Island's huge treasury did not have such treasures. Instead, he found one in Hu Guang's storage ring. It should be Hu Guang's personal item. Lu Yi had planned to refine it in a few days to increase the quality of his spiritual source. That way his cultivation efficiency should increase slightly. Now, it seemed that there was no need to refine it. He could just give it to Aunt Yu as a gift. Although the treasure was precious, if Juyan had not appeared that day, it would have been difficult to resolve the matter. If the Three-World Island wanted to develop on the Myriad Elephant Sea in the future, it could not do without the protection of the Qieling realm. The next day, Lu Yi brought the gifts and set off with Chu Shen. They left the Myriad Elephant Sea and headed in the direction of the Qieling realm. The journey was smooth and uneventful. Chu Shen had not returned to the Qieling realm for many years, so he was rather excited along the way. When they arrived at the Qieling realm, there was no need to say anything. Under Chu Shen's lead, they directly entered the realm. The Thousand Sunset sect on the Thousand Sunset Mountain was the largest sect in the Qieling realm. It was also Juyan's sect. When Chu Shen and Lu Yi arrived, Aunt Yu was already waiting in front of a large hall. Clearly, she had sensed Chu Shen's return. Aunt Yu. Chu Shen shouted and stepped forward to greet her. It's rare that you still have the heart to come back. Aunt Yu pursed her lips and smiled. I thought you would never want to come back after leaving the Qieling realm. Chu Shen's expression turned bitter. Haven't I been so engrossed in cultivation that I completely forgot about myself? I was young and ignorant in the past, causing Mother and Aunt Yu to worry. Now that I've grown up, I know that home is where I belong. Aunt Yu blinked, somewhat gratified. Shen-er has really grown up. She looked up at Lu Yi behind Chu Shen. Lu Yi hurriedly bowed. Aunt Yu. Since Chu Xin called him Big Brother, he naturally followed suit. Although their cultivations were about the same, Aunt Yu was indeed much older. Aunt Yu was stunned for a moment. For a moment she didn't know how to respond. In the past, Lu Yi had called her fellow Taoist. Now she couldn't call Lu Yi by his name. They weren't familiar with this place yet. She could only nod. Island Master Lu. The #1 person under the sun. Even she didn't dare to ignore this title. It was a title that had been earned through real killing. Aunt Yu, this is Big Brother's gift for you. Chu Xin hurriedly handed over a storage ring that he had prepared in advance. Aunt Yu smiled. Since you're here, there's no need to bring a gift. Although she said this, she didn't refuse and reached out to take the ring. She casually checked it and her eyes lit up. You're very thoughtful. Not to mention how rare treasures that could increase the quality of one's source of origin were, just the top-grade soul-refining pill was indeed what she needed the most right now. It could be said that Lu Ye's gift was exactly what she wanted. Seeing this, Lu Yi secretly sighed in relief. Aunt Yu accepting the gift undoubtedly showed her attitude and didn't treat him as an outsider. But then again, if she really treated him as an outsider, Jiao Yan wouldn't have appeared on the island of versatility that day, and Aunt Yu wouldn't have specially made a trip to the three-world island. Where's Mother? Chu Xin didn't see Jiao Yan and asked. She's inside. Aunt Yu smiled. Mother. Chu Xin shouted and rushed into the main hall. He looked very much like a young daughter-in-law returning to her mother's home. Island Master Lu, please come in. Aunt Yu gestured with her hand. Thank you for your trouble, Lu Yi said. He followed behind Aunt Yu and walked into the hall. After entering the main hall, Lu Yi immediately saw the figure of a woman sitting at the head of the table. Chu Xin was standing beside her, laughing and talking about something. Lu Yi focused his gaze on Jiao Yan's face and was immediately stunned. This was because he still couldn't see her face clearly. Just like that day outside the island of versatility, Jiao Yan's face was covered by a layer of hazy light. Looking at Chu Xin's reaction, it was obvious that he saw something different. Therefore, Lu Yi vaguely felt that Jiao Yan had used some kind of method on him to hide her face. But why? Lu Yi was puzzled. End of chapter. Chapter 1875. Lu Ye's expression immediately turned solemn. He cupped his fists and bowed. Lu Yi of the Island of the Three Realms greets Senior Juyen. The hall was silent. Chu Xin stopped talking. Aunt Yu stood quietly by his side. Juyen didn't say anything. However, Lu Yi could sense that someone was staring at him. Strangely, for some reason, this gaze made him feel uncomfortable. It was as if someone who hated him was staring coldly at him. He couldn't help but frown. Juyen hated him? That didn't seem very likely. Up until now, he had only seen Juyen once outside the island of versatility a few days ago. Where did this hatred come from? It couldn't be because of Chu Xin, but it didn't seem right to say that it was just his imagination. Just as he was thinking, Juyen's voice came from the front. No need for formalities. That feeling suddenly disappeared without a trace. Have a seat, Juyen said again. Lu Yi sat quietly to the side. A female cultivator entered the room and served him tea. Lu Yi took a sip of the tea and placed it down. He then turned toward Jiao Yan and said, Senior, I'm sorry for taking the liberty to come here. I would like to thank you for what happened outside the island of versatility a few days ago. Before Lu Yi could finish, Juyen interrupted him. What happened outside the island of versatility was just a coincidence. I was visiting an old friend and happened to pass by when I was about to leave. The old friend she was talking about was undoubtedly Mu Qing. However, when Lu Yi observed Juyen and Mu Qing's expressions that day, he didn't see any deep friendship between Juyen and Mu Qing. But since she said so, Lu Yi couldn't bring it up again. Juyen was the sunshine of the Wanxiang galaxy. Yuandu was also the sunshine of the Wanxiang galaxy. In the end, Lu Yi was just an outsider. Juyen helping Lu Yi against Yuandu was equivalent to sunshine of the Wanxiang galaxy fighting against his own family for an outsider. Some things were better said than done, and some things could be done but not said. Of course, Lu Yi knew this. Since Shen calls you Big Brother, this queen will not treat you as an outsider. Both you and Shen are young and impetuous, so it is inevitable that you will be rash and impetuous in your actions. Although it is too late to say these things now, you really should not have killed Hu Shui that day. You should know the relationship between Hu Shui and Yuandu with your strength. Even if Hu Shui can control the battle arena, you should be able to protect yourself. You should let her know the difference in strength between you two and force her to voluntarily release the shackles of the battle arena. Senior is right. Lu Yi nodded. Actually, when I was trapped in the battle arena that day, I had no intention of killing her. It was just that some of her actions forced me to kill her. What did she do? Aunt Yu asked curiously. Lu Yi thought for a moment and felt that there was nothing he couldn't say, so he went straight to the point. That day on the battle stage, Hu Shui wasn't my match. I forced her to release the seal, but she ended up tearing her clothes apart. Under such circumstances, if she suddenly released the seal again with Yuan Du by her side, I wouldn't be able to explain myself even if I had 10,000 mouths. So, I could only kill her, destroy her body, and destroy all evidence. So explosive? Chu Shin's eyes widened when he heard this. Thinking about it, in the middle of a life-and-death battle, the other party suddenly treated him with sincerity. This scene was really ridiculous. Aunt Yu frowned and couldn't help scolding, "How shameless!" Although Jiao Yan didn't say anything, it was obvious that he had the same thought. He nodded and said, "If that's the case, then killing her was indeed the best response." Then he changed the topic. "But I heard that Hu Shui is a heavenly beauty and even Yuan Du dotes on her. Her life is in your hands, so she will definitely beg for mercy. Aren't you the least bit tempted?" Lu Yi lowered his eyes. "In a battle, under my long saber, either the enemy dies or I die. Whether she's beautiful or ugly, it's all the same to me." Jiao Yan nodded slightly and turned to look at Chu Shen. "Learn from your big brother. You still have a long way to go in the future. Sooner or later you will encounter trouble with beauty. You must not destroy yourself because of compassion." "Yes." Chu Shen hurriedly responded. He then turned his head and winked at Lu Yi. His face was full of admiration for Lu Yi as his big brother. Jiao Yan asked again, "What are you going to do with Zixian?" Lu Yi replied honestly, "Although several forces have contacted us wanting to occupy Zixian, this island has no intention to agree. Zixian has not been dealt with for the time being, and no one dares to easily occupy it. Just wait, it won't be long before someone comes to contact you." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. "Senior, are you referring to Zixian Demon Star?" Jiao Yan nodded and said, "And it's probably Rizhao who will come to deal with this matter personally." Although Lu Yi had expected this when he heard Jiao Yan's judgment, he still felt a little unconfident. If Rizhao comes, then our three-world island is not qualified to talk to him on an equal footing. If the other party uses force, Aunt Yu coldly snorted and said, "In this vast 10,000 elephant sea, even if a dragon comes, it will have to coil up. If Rizhao comes, you can talk to him. Unless he has the courage to break the rules, he will have to act according to the rules. There's nothing to be afraid of." Lu Yi understood. This time he came to Che Ling Boundary not only to express his gratitude, but also because of this matter. He speculated that Zixian would definitely send a powerful expert to deal with the matter of Zixian Island. He could not count on Lionheart, which meant that he could not count on the entire Yu Yao faction. Therefore, Zixian would most likely send a powerful expert from Zixian. In front of Rizhao, Lu Yi had to think about how to fight for his own interests. Che Ling Boundary's attitude had undoubtedly reassured him. Aunt Yu's words clearly told him that it did not matter whether the other party was Rizhao or not, the three-world island could do whatever they wanted. Zixian hated the three-world island to the core, but if they wanted to take back Zixian Island, they would have to abide by the rules of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If an outsider like Rizhao dared to casually make a move in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, the 10,000 Elephant Sea would not tolerate it. "I know what to do." Lu Yi nodded. "That's good." Jiao Yan was undoubtedly very satisfied with his performance. There were many smart people in this world, but being smart and cautious was undoubtedly a good character. Such people generally did not die young. Che Ling Boundary is not big, but the scenery is not bad. If you are not in a hurry to leave, you can stay in this boundary for a while and let Shinra entertain you. Seeing that Jiao Yan was about to leave, Lu Yi hurriedly said, "Senior, I have one more thing to ask." "What is it?" "Is there a female cultivator called Ban Ci in this boundary?" Lu Yi asked. "No." Jiao Yan shook her head, then asked, "Why are you looking for her?" Lu Yi didn't know why he was looking for her. Speaking of which, he didn't have much contact with Han Ci. They only went to a secret place together, but something happened there. Since then, Han Ci hadn't been heard from since. If that was all, it would be fine. The woman had left after something like that. Lu Yi did not want to be entangled with her. The key was that when he came to Che Ling Boundary last time, he saw a little girl called Ban Xia. That little girl's eyebrows and eyes were very similar to the little girl he had saved in a ruined boundary back then. Afterward, he learned from Chu Xin that Ban Xia was the child of a boundary and carried the destiny of a boundary. If he was not mistaken, Ban Xia should be the little girl he had saved back then. And Ban Xia and Ban Ci, there was a lot of room for imagination. In fact, when Banxia was saved back then, she was taken into a small world by Banxi. Now that Banxia was in Ling boundary, Lu Yi was very puzzled. It's nothing. Lu Yi replied in a muffled voice. Jiao Yan's interest was piqued. She asked, could it be that you've done something wrong to her? You've let her down again? No. Lu Yi hurriedly denied. Under the hazy halo, Jiao Yan looked deeply at Lu Yi. As a man you have to be responsible. Being fickle and heartless is the most shameful thing. Take care of yourself. With that he stood up and left. Lu Yi also stood up and bowed. He was speechless. Speaking of which, there was no such thing as being irresponsible between him and Han Ci, and there was no such thing as being heartless. The main thing was that he had not seen Han Ci since that day. If he had the chance to see her, Lu Yi wanted to ask her what she meant. Since he had already achieved his goal, Lu Yi naturally would not stay in Ling boundary for long. Chu Xin still had to stay here for a few days before returning to Three World Island. The two brothers bade farewell. Lu Yi did not let him send him off and left on his own. From Ling boundary to Three World Island and into the Wanxiang Sea, he happened to pass by Zixian. Since Lu Yi had nothing to do, he took the time to visit Zixian. He found that the huge Zixian was now overcrowded. Countless homeless cultivators gathered here in groups of 2s and 3s. To most cultivators, other than the Wanxiang Island, they would never be able to enter the other top spiritual islands. Now that Zixian was ownerless, they were naturally happy to come and watch the fun. Especially the Spirit Jade Mine, it was the most attractive. This was a rare opportunity to broaden one's horizons. As for cultivating here, that was absolutely impossible. Setting aside the fact that there were too many cultivators gathered here, without the protection of the Grand Array, the energy escaping from the myriad phenomenon sea would not be able to stay on Violet Jade Island. Thus, even if he were to cultivate here, it would be useless. Everyone came here to watch the fun. As for setting up the array, this huge Zixian was the spoils of war of Three World Island. Whoever dared to do so would be provoking Three World Island. They were afraid that once they set up the array, they would be targeted and attacked by Three World Island. Therefore, this resulted in such a huge top-grade spiritual island being overcrowded with people, yet it was in a strange state of being ownerless. This had never happened before in the entire history of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lu Yi did not stay for too long. He only checked for a while before leaving. After returning to Three World Island, he had not even warmed his seat when Luan Xiao came to find him. Yan Miao came with her. Senior sisters, your red Luan stars are moving, and your faces are glowing. Are you expecting something? Lu Yi teased. Luan Xiao could not help but glare at him. Don't talk nonsense. She changed the topic. I want to step down from my position as island master. Yan Miao said, me too. End of chapter. Chapter 1876. Luan Xiao was about to step down from her position as the first island master, but she came to inform Lu Yi, the third island master. This would never happen on any other spiritual island. Senior martial sisters, what happened? Lu Yi's expression turned serious. To be honest, ever since the Three Realms cultivators came to the Wanxiang Sea, Luan Xiao had always been in charge. She had done a good job. Lu Yi was a little confused by her sudden appearance today. Yan Miao was the same. Luan Xiao looked at him and said, I'm going into seclusion for a while. I'm not sure how long it will take. The same goes for the first elder. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat. Realization dawned on him, and he looked delighted. Congratulations, senior sisters. Both Luan Xiao and Yan Miao were at the peak of the Yu Yao realm. If they were going into seclusion, there was only one thing they could do: break through the Yu Yao realm and ascend to sunshine. This was undoubtedly great news for the Three Realms Island. After so many years of nourishment from supreme-grade spirit refining pills, were they finally going to bear fruit? If Luan Xiao could really take that step, then she would truly become the first sunshine cultivator in the Jade Conch galaxy. If Yan Miao ascended to sunshine, the significance would be equally great. For countless years, only the royal bloodline of the Merfolk tribe had a chance of ascending to sunshine. This was because of the bloodline curse. If Yan Miao succeeded, then the Merfolk tribe would also have their own sunshine. Their living conditions under the sea would be much better. However, it was not so easy to ascend from Yu Yao to sunshine. There were countless galaxies in the universe. Which one did not have their own Yu Yao? Although the number of Yu Yao in the cultivation world was not as large as the number of constellations, there were still many of them. However, there were not many sunshine cultivators. Senior sisters, have you suddenly sensed an opportunity? Lu Yi asked. Luan Xiao shook her head. Actually, the first elder and I sensed an opportunity 2 years ago. However, the Three Realms Island was not completely stable yet. We were worried. Things are different now. The purple jade has been broken. I'm sure no one will dare to cause trouble for the island. We can go into seclusion without worry. I see. Lu Yi understood. When do you plan to begin? As soon as possible. Wan Xiao replied, 5 Yueao. After Grand Elder and I leave, the Merfolk clan will transfer 2nd Elder Yushi and 4th Elder Qing Xan over to fill the vacancies. In the future, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Three World Island. There were a few newly ascended Yu Yao on the island, but because they had just ascended, their cultivation was still insufficient, making it difficult for them to take on important tasks. Thus, they still had to be transferred from the mermaid tribe. After all, if there really was a battle, the mermaid tribe wouldn't care whether you were a newly ascended Yu Yao or not. When it was time to kill, they wouldn't show any mercy. Sure. Lu Yi nodded repeatedly. He Baichuan's face appeared in his mind. Later on, he could hand over all matters of the Three-World Island to He Baichuan. With old Tang assisting from the side, it wouldn't be too bad. After discussing some details with Luan Xiao and Yen Miao, the two women left. They had to wait a few days for Yushi and Cheng Xian to come over from the mermaid tribe's territory. Then they would make a trip to the island of Versatility to change the information of the island's guardian Yu Yao. Only then could Yushi and Cheng Xian be considered the guardians of the Three-Realm Island Yu Yao. As for where Luan Xiao and Yen Miao would go into seclusion, what place in the world had better conditions than a spirit jade mine? Thus, the two women had to go to the mermaid tribe's territory. There was another advantage to doing this. Once they successfully ascended to the Sunshine Realm, no one would be alerted. If they were allowed to stay in seclusion on the Three-World Island, they wouldn't be able to hide the fact that they ascended to the Sunshine Realm. At that time, they wouldn't be able to stay on the island of Versatility for long. Even if they didn't want to leave, they would have to leave. There was a precedent for this. Since ancient times, there had always been a few Yu Yao who ascended to the Sunshine Realm on the island of Versatility. However, without exception, they could only stay for a short while before leaving. In the blink of an eye, the island's Yu Yao had two new guardians. The island master's ranking had also been changed. Lu Yi had become the first island master of the Three-World Island. This was indisputable. Even though the other Yu Yao were older than him in both cultivation and age, no one had any objections to him being the first island master. The Three-World Island was the most famous, and the strongest person on the island was the first island master. This was a deterrent to outsiders. When others mentioned the Three-World Island, they would think of the number one person under the Sunshine Realm. He Baichuan became the second island master, followed by Ma Shangxi, Yushi, and Cheng Xian. Perhaps because of the battle with Zi Xian, the Three-World Island had become more and more lively recently. The flow of customers had more than doubled. This made many shopkeepers rejoice that they had chosen to set up shop here in the first place. However, they were also a little worried because they didn't know if the rent would increase in the future. Luan Xiao and Yen Miao went to the Merfolk tribe's territory to cultivate in seclusion. Lu Yi also began his own seclusion. Speaking of which, he had long since planned to break through to the late-stage Yu Yao. However, he had always been delayed by various things. Now that he had defeated Zi Xian, no one would come looking for trouble, right? He left his talent tree clone on the island, while his main body dove into the sea. He activated the talent tree's power and opened his mind to refine the seawater. Time passed. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, on the bustling island of the Three-World, a young man with a dignified appearance strode through the spacious streets, and he sized up the surroundings with great interest. Soon the young man arrived at a place. This was the boundary between the Three-World Island's trade area and the island's cultivators' residential area. If he continued forward, he would arrive at the island's cultivators' residential area. Under normal circumstances, cultivators who came to the Three-World Island to do business wouldn't come here. There were also cultivators from the Three-World Island guarding this place. Seeing that the young man didn't change his direction and continued walking, a cultivator from the Three-World Island immediately stepped forward and blocked his path. He raised his hand and gestured, "Halt. The area ahead is not open to outsiders. If you wish to buy or sell something, you may return." The young man clasped his hands behind his back and smiled calmly. "I'm not here to buy anything. I'm here to see your first island master." The cultivator blocking the way asked, "May I ask who you are? Why do you wish to see the first island master?" "There are indeed some matters I wish to discuss with him." The young man didn't answer directly. Instead he took out a jade tablet and flicked it with a finger. "Please bring this to your first island master. You will naturally know." The cultivator took the jade tablet and glanced at it. He couldn't see anything special about it. He couldn't help but look at the young man in front of him. Only now did he realize to his surprise that he couldn't see through the young man's cultivation. This undoubtedly meant that the young man was most likely Yu Yao. Moreover, although the young man looked young, his bearing was extremely steady. The first impression he had was that he had a powerful background. Now that the Three World Islands' reputation had spread, many people naturally came to pay them a visit. However, most of the cultivators who came were looking for Tang Jun. By now, everyone knew that Tang Jun was the true representative of the Three World Island. Thus, if they truly wanted to cooperate with the Three World Island, he was the best choice. In the past, there had been people who had come to see Lu Yi, but after being turned down a few times, no one had come to see him again. "Please wait a moment," the cultivator from the Three World Island said, then immediately turned and left. Not long after, within Lu Ye's bamboo tower, the innate skill tree clone carefully examined the jade tablet. He raised an eyebrow. "A young man?" The cultivator who came nodded. "He's very young." Of course, in the cultivation world, a youthful appearance didn't mean that one was truly young. It was possible that one was an old monster. The one who came this time was undoubtedly such an old monster. Moreover, he was a true old monster. That was because there was an extremely faint but extremely pure demonic aura lingering on the jade tablet. Lu Yi had a rough idea of the young man's background. "Invite him in," Lu Yi ordered. "Yes." After a while, the innate skill tree clone was waiting in front of the bamboo tower. When he saw the young man who came in with the disciple, his expression couldn't help but turn solemn. Ever since he returned from Che Ling realm that day, he had been waiting for this day to come. He had also imagined what kind of method Rizhao of Zixian would use if he really wanted to discuss the matter of Zixian Island with him. It was very likely that he would ask someone else to pass on the message and then ask him to meet somewhere. However, Lu Yi had never expected that the young man would come over himself. For someone like Rizhao, this was undoubtedly a bit condescending. What was even more unexpected to Lu Yi was that the young man came over silently, without leaving any trace. Moreover, he even used the method of asking for an audience. It wasn't that Rizhao couldn't come to the Three World Island. With Rizhao's status, if he came to the island in a domineering manner, it would be normal for him to show off his supreme prestige as a deterrent. After all, everyone had a blood feud. There was no need to be so polite. This demon was not easy to deal with. This was Lu Ye's first impression of the young man when he saw him. Zixian's huge change didn't seem to affect him at all. Along the way, he didn't show any resentment or other emotions on his face. Instead, he looked around with interest. First Island Master. The Three World Island cultivator who led the way came forward and cupped his fists. Lu Yi nodded and waved his hand, dismissing him. He looked straight at the young man who followed him. The young man also happened to look over. When their eyes met, the young man's clear eyes were like a deep pool. They were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. What made Lu Yi slightly puzzled was that he seemed to have seen this guy somewhere before. However, he couldn't remember at the moment. Three World Island Lu Yi. Lu Yi bowed first. "Hey Yun." The young man nodded slightly and introduced himself. Lu Yi could not suppress the doubts in his heart and asked bluntly, "May I ask, Demon Venerable, have we met somewhere before?" On the Zixian demon planet, Yu Yao was the king while Rizhao was the supreme. Demons like Lionheart and Hu Guang were all demon kings. Heiyun was a demon venerable. This wasn't a division of strength, but a division of the demon race's status system. Heiyun smiled and said, "Reincarnation tree, alpha origin stage." Lu Yi was enlightened. He finally remembered where he had seen Heiyun before. When Yang Qing had brought him to the reincarnation tree to participate in the Battle of the Divine Sea, he had seen many experts from various domains in the hall. Heiyun was from the Zixian demon star, and at that time he had also brought along a rising star called Zixian. End of chapter. Chapter 1877. I've always felt that the name Lu Yi sounded familiar, but now I know that you are the Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens. Heiyun smiled slightly, his gaze somewhat scrutinizing. Your cultivation speed is really fast. You were only at the Divine Sea realm back then, but now you're already at the intermediate Moonjade stage. Even Lionheart is no match for you. I was just lucky. Lu Yi said as he gestured, "Demon Venerable, please." Heiyun nodded and walked up the bamboo building with his hands still behind his back. After a short while, the host and guest took their seats. Yun was still looking around as if curious about everything. However, Lu Ye's bamboo building was extremely simple and crude. Besides a few pieces of furniture, there was nothing else, so Yun couldn't see anything special about it. The visitor was a guest, and the other party was Ri Guang, who had come by asking for an audience. Of course, Lu Yi couldn't be rude. He took out a tea set from his storage ring and slowly began to brew tea. Amidst the fragrance of the tea, Yun suddenly said, "Actually, this venerable has always been very curious about one thing. Can Island Master Lu enlighten me? What is Demon Venerable talking about? Back then, during the battle of the Divine Sea Realm in the Alpha Origin stage, how did you kill all the vampires? Do you have some kind of method that can target vampires and accurately find them?" "Something like that." Lu Yi nodded. Speaking of which, he had learned the blood cry technique from a certain vampire. Otherwise, how could he have found the other vampires? To be able to find them and kill them all, this kind of strength is rare in the Divine Sea Realm. Back then, in the Alpha Origin stage, the vampires could easily gather together by relying on their special bloodline. In other words, at that time, you had the strength to be invincible among your peers. Now you can still do this even at the Moon Jade stage. The talent of the human race is really terrifying and enviable. I dare not call myself invincible, Demon Venerable is too kind. Lu Yi carefully replied. After all, the other party was Ri Guang. No matter how approachable and harmless he appeared, Lu Yi still had to be on guard. Although he was here with his talent tree avatar, and even if something happened it wouldn't affect his main body, it was better to be careful. There is one more thing that this venerable doesn't understand. Yun did not seek Lu Ye's opinion this time and asked directly, "What means did you use to break Purple Jade Island's defensive array?" It had already been more than 2 months since the Three-World Island attacked and occupied Zixian. Yun rushed over after receiving the news. Naturally, he had already learned the whole story from Lionheart. Disregarding the powerful individual strength that Lu Yi had displayed from the beginning to the end, what Yun couldn't understand the most was why Zixian's defensive array had a problem at that critical juncture, giving Lu Yi an opportunity to take advantage of it. Was it a coincidence? That was too much of a coincidence. But if it wasn't a coincidence, there seemed to be no way to explain it. If Zixian's defensive array didn't have any problems, even if the Three-World Island had 100 years, they wouldn't be able to break it. The sudden collapse of the protective formation was the root cause of Zixian's destruction. All the cultivators on the 10,000 Form C who witnessed the battle felt that it was a coincidence, but Yun felt that something was amiss. There's something wrong with Zixian's defensive formation. I didn't break it. I just happened to be there. Of course, Lu Yi wouldn't admit to the details. If the secret of the minor constellation hall was exposed, he would no longer have a foothold in the 10,000 Form C. If he could use the minor constellation hall to destroy Zixian today, then could he destroy the 10,000 Forms Island in the future? The defenses of the other top-grade spiritual islands were no longer as impregnable. "Have some tea, Demon Venerable?" Lu Yi raised his hand and poured a cup of tea for Yun. Yun nodded. He was about to say something when Lu Yi interrupted him. "If Demon Venerable wants to take back Zixian Island, the Three-World Island has no objections. However, we have 2 conditions." Even if the other party was Rizhao, Lu Yi couldn't let him have the initiative of the conversation. The issue of Zixian's ownership was his trump card. Yun had no choice but to respond to this topic, unless he didn't want Zixian Island anymore. Yun obviously realized how difficult it was to deal with Lu Yi. The relaxed attitude that he had deliberately created was instantly shattered with this sentence. He raised his teacup and took a sip. He smiled and said, "Speak." Lu Yi looked at him and said seriously, "The first condition is that the Three-World Island wants Zixian to compensate us with 10 billion spirit jades or resources of the same value." Yun opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Lu Yi interrupted him. "Let me first explain to Demon Venerable why we want this compensation. That day I received an invitation from Zixian and went to attend the banquet. During the banquet, your island's demonic cultivators wanted to perform a blood sacrifice. The sacrifice was a newly promoted Yu Yao from the Three-World Island. In order to save his life, I negotiated with Hu Guang to redeem him with 1 billion spirit jades. Hu Guang agreed. He promised that as long as I paid him 1 billion spirit jades, he could take the island's cultivators and leave safely. Demon Venerable can find someone to verify this. Many people saw it with their own eyes that day. After that, I immediately ordered people to gather 1 billion spirit jades of resources and sent them to Zixian Island. Hu Guang led his people to receive them, but in the blink of an eye, he reneged on his debt and embezzled those treasures. He Yun pursed his lips. When he was about to speak, Lu Yi said, "Although 10 billion is a lot, I believe Zixian can take it out. Demon Venerable, you don't have to bargain. My conditions are the bottom line of the three-world island. This is only asking Zixian to pay back 10 times. If Demon Venerable wants to bargain, I can totally ask for 20 billion, 30 billion, or even more." He Yun frowned. For the first time since he met Lu Yi, he didn't look as calm as before. 10 billion spirit jades or resources of the same value was not a small sum even for Zixian. He looked up at Lu Yi and said, "But as far as I know, after you attacked Zixian, you should have taken back the spirit jades. Not only that, there should be even more loot in the treasury." Lu Yi said indifferently, "Demon Venerable, you also said that those were loot. Our three-world island sent troops and cultivators to fight. Don't we need to consume resources? If Demon Venerable confuses the loot with the ransom paid by our island, then it's completely unreasonable." He said in a serious tone, "Only if you agree to the first condition can we continue to talk." He Yun stared at Lu Yi for a long time before saying, "You're a little rude, aren't you? This Venerable is Rizhao after all." In other words, Lu Yi didn't have the humble attitude that Yu Yao should have when facing Rizhao. Lu Yi said matter-of-factly, "Demon Venerable, we're negotiating, not chatting. I believe that Demon Venerable has already mentally prepared himself before coming here." He Yun snorted. He was mentally prepared, but he didn't expect Lu Yi to be so greedy. After a moment of silence, He Yun said, "I agree to the first condition. Tell me about the second one." They lost the Battle of the Spiritual Islands and lost Zixian. Now that they wanted to take back Zixian, the three-world island's attitude was the key. As long as the three-world island insisted, he had to agree to this condition. Lu Yi's eyes flashed with killing intent. "I want Lionheart's life." Lionheart escaped to the island of versatility. This was a thorn in his heart. He had to remove it no matter what. The reason why he wanted to sell Zixian back then was not only because Zixian could offer a very high price. If it was purely for the spirit jades, there was no need for him to sell it back to Zixian. Even if other forces offered a lower price, Lu Yi could still accept it. The main reason was to kill Lionheart. Lionheart escaped to the island of versatility. As long as he didn't come out, Lu Yi would never have the chance to kill him. Of course, Lionheart couldn't hide in the island of versatility forever. However, Lu Yi couldn't keep an eye on him forever. Therefore, he had to think of other ways to kill Lionheart. He Yun said in a low voice, "Kid, don't be rude." Lu Yi said calmly, "Let me explain to the Demon Lord why I want Lionheart's life." He Yun's head hurt when he heard this. It sounded so familiar. That day, Hu Guang refused to admit that he had taken the ransom from Three World Island. That Lionheart swallowed the newly promoted Yu Yao guard alive. A life for a life, a debt of blood for a blood debt, right? He Yun said, "Your three-world island lost Wei Pe, but Zixian's casualties are far greater than yours. How do you explain this?" If it weren't for Lionheart swallowing Wei Pe, there wouldn't have been such a dispute. The Purple Jade's death was the result of war, it was completely self-inflicted. How can it be compared to the death of Wei Pe? Lu Yi argued. "Alright." He Yun became serious, "Let's not talk about the losses from the war. As far as I know, Zixian captured Wei Pe because he killed Zixian's Yao cultivator first." Lu Yi couldn't help but sneer, "Demon Lord, you believe this? Zixian is so famous. Although Wei Pe hasn't been in the Wanxiang Sea for long, he at least knows who he can offend and who he can't. Let's not talk about whether he would pass by Zixian. Even if he did, he would stay far away. How could he kill Zixian's Yao cultivator near Zixian? Lionheart isn't dead yet. Demon Lord, you can ask him what's going on. Of course, if Demon Lord pretends to be confused, then we don't have to talk anymore. I think Demon Lord knows better than anyone why my junior brother Wei Pe was captured. Zixian Island became someone's lackey and schemed against the three-world island. Who can they blame for their current situation? It's a pity that my junior brother Wei Pe just became a Yu Yao cultivator with a bright future, but he became Zixian's chess piece. What crime did Wei Pe commit? How dare you?" He Yun couldn't help but be called a lackey by Lu Yi. "Do you really think that I won't do anything to you just because your clone is here?" Lu Yi blinked and said, "I do have a clone, but since I'm meeting Demon Lord, I won't be so careless. If Demon Lord wants to make a move, just do it." It was possible for He Yun to see through the details of the Precious Blood avatar, but with the Talent Tree avatar here, Lu Yi was sure that even He Yun could not see through it. That sentence just now was just a test of He Yun's annoyance. He couldn't wait for He Yun to make a move. If that happened, he would lose a talent tree clone. He just needed to take back the roots of the talent tree and be a hero again. However, once He Yun made a move here, Zixuan Demon Star would no longer have a place to stand in the vast Wanxiang Sea. I have something to do today. Sorry, I have to go out. End of chapter. Chapter 1878. Inside the loft, He Yun stared deeply at him. No one knew what he was thinking, but in the end he didn't make a move. He pointed at Lu Yi and said, "You should be glad that it was me who came this time. If it was my senior brothers who came, based on what you said just now, I'm afraid they would already be dead." Lu Yi said, "Then you should be glad that you're here." He Yun was not angry at all. In fact, when the incident at Purple Jade Island was reported back to the Purple Jade demonic planet, many demon venerables were furious. It was He Yun who persuaded them to calm down and come personally to deal with the matter. He knew the temper of those demon venerables. They were easily triggered. Asking them to come over would only make the situation worse. Therefore Lu Yi was right when he said that he should be glad. Of course, he knew the consequences if Purple Jade Rizhao killed Lu Yi here. Lu Yi took a sip of tea and said casually, "Demon Venerable, you don't have to feel like you're at a disadvantage. This is a good deal." He Yun sneered, "How is it a good deal? 10 billion spirit jades was one thing, Zixuan could afford it. However, the key was Lionheart's life. He really couldn't agree to this request. As Zixuan Rizhao, if he agreed to this condition, how would he explain it to the Zixuan Demon Star when he returned? The Lionheart clan was still very powerful on the Purple Jade demonic planet. Lu Yi said, "A top-grade spirit island and a spirit jade mine with an annual production of 30 million spirit jades. If you think this is not a good deal, then how much is your realm's face worth? Demon Venerable, you should know that your realm has not only lost Purple Jade Island, but also the face of a top-grade domain. 10 billion spirit jades in Yueyao's life in exchange for this, is it not worth it?" He Yun was left speechless. Indeed, compared to taking back the Zixuan Island, the Zixuan demonic star's reputation was what he needed to consider the most. If he could take back the Zixuan Island, he would be able to pick up the reputation that he had lost. However, if he could not take back the Zixuan Island, the Zixuan demonic star would become the first top force in the Vientiane Sea to lose their spiritual island. Who could resist this? He Yun was tired. Although he knew that they were at an absolute disadvantage in this negotiation, he did not expect Lu Yi to be so difficult to deal with. "I want Lionheart's life to give the cultivators of this island an explanation. I know why Demon Venerable is unwilling to agree. It's just a matter of face. It's Purple Jade demonic planet. If the Purple Jade demonic planet, it would be a blow to its reputation. The world would think that Jade was afraid of Three World Island and was giving up Lionheart. This was the Purple Jade demonic planet's demonic planet. Demonic planet could not accept this. Since you already know, then you should understand that it's impossible for me to agree to the second condition." He Yun's face darkened. Lu Yi said indifferently, "Lionheart sacrificed his monster core in a desperate fight. Although he was lucky enough to survive, his monster core must have been damaged. As far as I know, he has no hope of sunlight to begin with and can only be tempered in the Yu Jade realm. Now that his monster core has been damaged, his future will be even bleaker. There are many Yu Jade realms in your esteemed realm, so why can't you give up on Lionheart?" He Yun said, "Then why did Three World Island start a war for Weipa?" Lu Yi blinked and did not want to be entangled with him on this issue. She changed the topic and said, "The problem of your honorable realm's reputation can actually be solved. It just depends on whether the Demon Lord is willing or not. What I want is Lionheart's life, not to kill him in public." Pausing for a moment, Lu Yi continued, "Taking a step back, Lionheart, as the first island master of Zixuan, actually lost the foundation that your realm's ancestors worked hard for over 10,000 years. I believe Zixuan must be very angry about this, right? Won't they hold you accountable? Lionheart's mistake cannot be forgiven even if he dies." He Yun stared into Lu Ye's eyes. After a long while he pointed at him. "That mouth of yours. I'm afraid it's poisonous." Lu Yi did not respond. He Yun pondered for a while. Then he raised his hand and sent a musical note to Lu Yi. Lu Yi caught it and understood He Yun's intention. He handed his own musical note to He Yun. The two sides exchanged musical notes. He Yun stood up without a word. Lu Yi respectfully sent him off. A moment later, He Yun soared into the sky and disappeared. Lu Yi stood in place and watched. Although He Yun did not give a definite answer in the end, since he was willing to exchange musical note imprints, it was a good start. Perhaps He Yun was hesitating. Perhaps he had already made a decision. However, Lui could not guess what it was. Three World Island had already made two conditions. If Purple Jade still wanted to take back Purple Jade Island, they had to agree to those two conditions. Otherwise, as time passed, it was hard to say whether Lu Yi would find another home for Purple Jade. If that happened, Purple Jade would be the one suffering. Therefore, Three World Island was not in a hurry to come to a conclusion. The one who should be anxious was Purple Jade. The Talent Tree clone continued to guard the island, while the main body cultivated greedily under the Vientiane Sea. He Baichuan also knew that Lu Yi had always been a hands-off boss. Therefore, after Luan Xiao went into seclusion, he took over all of Three World Island's affairs. With Tang Jun's assistance, there was no major trouble on the island. Occasionally there would be some small problems, but they would be quickly resolved. After their victory over Purple Jade, the many-star mansions of Three World Island spent their days cultivating diligently. Even the newly promoted Yu Yao were no exception. Although the promotion of Yu Yao was not the beginning, it was not the end either. Who did not wish to improve their cultivation? 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, the musical note on the Talent Tree clone guarding the island suddenly vibrated. The clone hurriedly checked. The message from the musical note was very simple. There was only one location. When he checked the source of the message, he immediately understood. In the next moment, Lu Ye's main body, who had been under the sea for 4 months, slowly opened his eyes. His figure swept up and silently flew out of the sea, heading in a certain direction. A few days later, a star boat leisurely streaked across the starry sky. This star boat was completely sealed. In other words, no one could see what was inside from the outside. This kind of star boat was not rare in the starry sky, so it did not attract much attention. There were 2 figures in the star boat. One of them was driving the star boat, while the other was sitting cross-legged at the back. In comparison, the figure sitting cross-legged at the back was extremely tall and burly. However, his aura seemed to be somewhat unstable and his broad face was pale. Suddenly, the burly figure opened his eyes. He was bewildered. "Fellow Taoist, is there any commotion outside?" When the cultivator driving the star boat heard this, he said, "Someone was fighting nearby just now. There's no need to panic." Fights were common in the myriad phenomenon galaxy. When the burly figure heard this, he was slightly relieved. In the past, there was no one in the vast myriad phenomenon sea that he was afraid of. He was of noble birth and his strength was strong enough. As long as the sun did not shine, no one could be his opponent. However, the battle a few months ago had shattered his confidence. It was only then that he realized there was someone stronger than him in the Yu Yao realm. Most importantly, that person was not at the late stage of the Yu Yao realm. He was only at the middle stage of the Yu Yao realm. When he fled to the myriad phenomenon island, if Hu Shui had not jumped out at the critical moment and trapped that person with the help of the battle arena, he would have died that day. Although he was in a sorry state and was unwilling to accept his fate, he did not want to seek revenge on that person. He only wanted to leave the myriad phenomenon sea and go as far as he could. Since He Yun had arranged for him to leave, he naturally obeyed. Moreover, the person escorting him was Yuan Cheng. It could be said that the arrangement was very appropriate. He had experienced the powerful killing intent of Lu Yi from the Three World Island. As long as he stayed here, he would not be able to rest in peace. However, as long as he could return to the demonic Zixuan star alive, he would have nothing to fear. "Fellow Taoist, let's go faster." Thinking of this, he urged. "All right." Yuan Cheng, who was steering the star boat at the front, responded. Although he appeared calm on the surface, his heart was filled with fear because he knew what was going to happen next. Before they set off, Yuan Du had secretly told him that he did not want to get involved in this kind of matter. However, looking at the entire myriad phenomenon island, there was no one else other than him who was suitable to escort Lionheart away. Moreover, since Yuan Du had spoken, he had no right to refuse. The star boat gradually sailed to a remote area. Even cultivators from various galaxies were rarely willing to come to this place because the space here was not stable enough. There seemed to be signs of a new insect passage being born. No one knew when this insect passage would be born, but once it was born, if they were in the vicinity, they might be sucked into it. Therefore, everyone usually stayed as far away from this area as possible. In the myriad phenomenon galaxy, there were several such remote areas, all of which were inaccessible. At this point, Yuan Cheng could not help but feel his heart in his throat. He became extremely nervous. In this state, no matter how well he hid, he was still detected by Lionheart behind him. At first, Lionheart did not realize it, but gradually he realized that something was wrong. Yuan Cheng was clearly on guard against something. After pondering for a moment, he hastily took out a star map to check. When he saw his current location, his expression changed. This was because this location was not on the path back to the demonic planet. To return to the demonic planet from the myriad phenomenon sea, one had to pass through an insect passage. Only by crossing another galaxy could one enter the galaxy where the demonic planet was located. However, the star boat was currently very far away from the correct path. He subconsciously thought that Yuan Cheng was harboring evil intentions and wanted to harm him. However, on second thought, he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Cheng was only at the early Yu Yao stage. Even if he was not in peak condition and his strength was greatly reduced, Yuan Cheng alone would not be a match for him. He could not help but recall the Black Cloud Demon Venerable's earnest advice before they set off from the Myriad Phenomenon Island. Lionheart's panicked expression gradually calmed down. He had a rough idea of what had happened. End of chapter. Chapter 1879. While thinking, Lionheart stood up slowly. His tall figure almost reached the top of the star boat, forcing Yuan Cheng to bend down slightly. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Yuan Cheng, thank you for escorting me all the way. Let's stop here." Yuan Cheng was surprised. He looked back and saw that Lionheart had stood up. He couldn't help but avert his eyes. "What do you mean?" Lionheart stared at him and said indifferently, "I have lived for so many years. Since the Demon Lord has arranged it, I will do as you say." Yuan Cheng hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. He just sighed slightly and opened the door of the star boat. Lionheart immediately jumped out and stood in the starry sky. His aura began to rise. He was furious and looked around. His roar spread in all directions, "Get out here!" He didn't see anyone nearby, but he knew that there must be someone here, and it was the person he was most afraid of. When the sound waves swept in all directions, Lionheart suddenly turned his head and looked in one direction. Sure enough, he saw a figure standing quietly on a meteorite. He seemed to have been there all along, but neither he nor Yuan Cheng had noticed him before. That person was tall and straight, with a young appearance and a long saber at his waist. Who else could it be but Lu Yi? They looked at each other. Lionheart's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Even if he knew that he was no match for him, even if he knew that he would die today, he still wanted to show off his last glory. This was the glory of a demon cultivator who had been famous for many years. Lu Yi stepped forward and walked toward Lionheart. At the same time, he spread out his divine sense and sensed the surroundings. Although he came here to ambush after receiving He Yun's message, he couldn't figure out what He Yun was thinking. If He Yun used Lionheart as bait and hid in the dark, it would be a trap for him. Therefore, Lu Yi had to be careful. Over the past few days, Lu Yi had set up a large number of alert arrays nearby. He also had several precious blood doppelgangers hiding nearby to ensure that if He Yun really set up a trap, he could escape immediately. But then again, He Yun had chosen this place to show his sincerity. If He Yun really wanted to set up a trap, there were better locations than this one. This location was more suitable for killing people. As they got closer, Lu Yi could clearly sense that something was wrong with Lionheart's condition. Although his aura seemed powerful, it was actually extremely weak. Even though it had been 4 months since the battle and Lionheart had been recuperating on the island of versatility, the backlash he received from using his beast core was not something he could recover from so easily. At this moment, Lionheart might not even be able to use 70% of his strength. He was also in a very sorry state because his body was covered with wounds of various sizes. These wounds were all left behind by the Pan Mountain Saber that day. Even after 4 months, the strange power of the Fang still hadn't dissipated and was hindering his recovery. Perhaps the Black Cloud had the ability to disperse the power of brightness, but it would have to pay a huge price and expend a great deal of energy. Lionheart's fate had already been decided, so he naturally would not waste this energy. "If I die today, can this realm take back Purple Jade Island?" Lionheart suddenly asked. Lu Yi, who was gradually approaching him, said calmly, "This is one of the conditions that the Three-World Island negotiated with the Demon Venerable." Lionheart understood and knew that things were as he had guessed. He then asked, "What other conditions are there?" 10 billion spirit jades. Lu Yi did not refuse to answer. "Nothing else?" "Nothing else." Lionheart nodded. The Three-World Island's way of doing things can be considered fair. Unfortunately, I, Lionheart, have managed Purple Jade Island for so many years, but in the end I've become a sinner. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Lu Yi looked at him coldly. Lionheart laughed. Even if time could turn back and I had another chance to choose, I would still devour that Wei Pa. How can there be so much indecisiveness in this world? Since I've made my choice, I'll walk down this path. That's why you deserve to die. Then let's see if you can kill me today. Lionheart roared furiously. Golden light flashed from his mouth as he directly summoned his demon core. Unlike the situation back then, the demon core suddenly shattered as soon as it was summoned. Soon after, a large expanse of golden light enveloped Lionheart. His body, which was already extremely burly in the first place, became dazzling golden in an instant. Core fusion technique. Taking out the beast core was a desperate method for beast cultivators. Although it would cause some damage and affect their foundation, as long as they could defeat the enemy, they would not die. However, the core fusion technique was different. It was the melting of the entire beast core, gathering all of its power into one's body. This was a true desperate secret technique. With one strike, regardless of whether the enemy died or not, the user would definitely die. Not all beast cultivators could use the core fusion technique. Lionheart happened to be the one who could use it. Lionheart could not help but recall He Yun's instructions before he set off. This was probably what He Yun wanted to see. He was a sinner of purple jade and no longer had the face to return to purple jade to prolong his life. Since that was the case, then he would release his last ray of light. Under the support of the core fusion technique, Lionheart's previous decadence changed. It was as if he had returned to his peak, and his aura had become even stronger than before. He was about to pounce on Lu Yi. However, at this moment, the long saber at Lu Ye's waist was unsheathed. Accompanied by the sound of the saber, Lionheart suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His burly body could not help but tremble. There was no other reason. The wounds on his body, big and small, had all burst open at the same time. It was as if countless small invisible hands were tearing at his wounds. His flesh and blood alone were not enough to move him. The key was that as his wounds inexplicably burst open, an indescribable sense of pain drilled into his heart and soul. The aura he had worked so hard to accumulate dissipated. Lionheart could not help but widen his eyes. All this time, he had been able to feel an inexplicable power lingering around his wounds. This power was difficult to dispel, so his injuries had not improved. However, he never imagined that Lu Yi would be able to control this inexplicable power from a distance. Blood splattered. The moment Lu Ye's saber was unsheathed, Lionheart turned into a bloody man. There was almost no part of his body that was intact. Amidst the bloody impact, the golden light that enveloped Lionheart became extremely unstable. Lu Yi had already arrived in front of Lionheart. Within the scabbard, the spiritual inscriptions of the saber draw that had been accumulating for several months dimmed. His figure flashed past Lionheart's side, and he slashed horizontally with his saber. The powerful physique that had once given Lu Yi a headache was no longer an obstacle in front of this saber. The sudden tearing of his flesh and blood had greatly reduced the toughness of his physique, making it impossible for him to withstand the explosive power of the saber draw. Lu Yi stood still and slowly returned the mountain pan saber to its scabbard. 300 meters behind him, Lionheart's burly figure stood tall in the air. He was still angry and arrogant, but he could not move, as if he had been hit by a paralyzing spell. All of a sudden, the mixture of golden light and bloody light that enveloped him shattered. A clear line of blood appeared on his neck, which was as thick as a bucket. Then blood spurted out like a fountain, and his head flew high into the air. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed the head. Holding it in his hand, he glanced indifferently to the side. In that direction, Yuan Cheng, who had yet to leave on his star boat, felt his scalp go numb. When Lionheart had used the core fusion technique and prepared to fight to the death, he had hoped that Lionheart would be able to drag Lu Yi down with him. After all, in this state, Lionheart should be invincible on Yu Yao's level. However, the reality was completely different from what he had expected. From beginning to end, Lu Yi had only used one saber strike, and it had been so powerful that he could barely look straight at Lionheart, who had been killed. This Lu Yi seemed to have become even stronger than the last time he had seen him. Moreover, Lu Yi didn't need to do this at all. Lionheart, who had used the core fusion technique, wouldn't live for much longer. Lu Yi only needed to tangle with him for a while, and Lionheart would die without a doubt. However, Lu Yi had still killed him with his own hands. This guy's vengeful nature was clear to see. Not only had Wei Pa died at the banquet that day, but he had also killed Lionheart in the end. Even though they were separated by the starry sky, Yuan Cheng could still feel Lu Ye's gaze on him. It made him tremble. Go back and tell Yuan Du that the cause of all this isn't the three-world island. The cultivators of the three-world island have come from afar to make a living, and it's rare for them to have a foothold here. If anyone wants to take away this foundation, the cultivators of the three-world island will never allow it. Get out of here. Yuan Qing felt as if he had been pardoned. He hurriedly steered his star boat back the way he had come. He made up his mind that he would never accept such a task again. It would scare him to death. After Yuan Qing left, Lu Yi turned to look at Lionheart's corpse. After a moment's thought, he put it away in his storage ring. Lionheart's physique was so strong, so his demon bones were definitely not bad. They would be good materials for refining artifacts. He couldn't waste them. In fact, he had collected all the demon bones of Yu Yao who had died on Purple Jade Island. However, there was a downside to using demon bones to refine artifacts. If he used them against enemies and the demon race discovered them, they would easily become hostile. The three-world island and the Purple Jade demonic star had already formed a grudge, so there was no need to worry about this. The battle here had ended in an instant. From the beginning to the end, Black Cloud demonic star hadn't shown up, nor had there been any hidden ambushes. From this, it seemed that Black Cloud demonic star was quite sincere. This also proved one thing: the Purple Jade demonic star couldn't wait to take back Purple Jade Island, so it didn't want to cause any trouble. Lu Yi leisurely returned to the three-world island. When he returned to the main island, he summoned He Baichuan. He Baichuan didn't know what had happened and hurried over. However, when he arrived, he saw Lu Yi tossing a giant head in front of him. He Baichuan was startled. When he took a closer look, he was astonished. Lionheart? Then he looked up at Lu Yi. That's not right. Wasn't he hiding on the island of Versatility? Junior brother, how did you kill him? He couldn't say that Lu Yi had broken into the island of Versatility and killed Lionheart. That was impossible. Lu Yi said, didn't the Black Cloud demonic star come by a few days ago? I made some deals with him and Lionheart's life was one of them. He Baichuan's face was filled with disbelief. That Black Cloud demonic star actually agreed to such a thing? They want to take back Purple Jade Island, so we can't not agree. Lu Yi pointed at Lionheart's head and said, find some time to send it to Senior Sister Luan. Senior Sister is trying to break through the sunshine and Lionheart is dead. It should be able to untie a knot in her heart and clear her mind. It might help. End of chapter. Chapter 1880. Island of Myriad. Yuan Du and He Yun sat across from each other in an octagonal pavilion in Yuan Du's palace, sipping tea. Yuan Du picked it up and examined it, then looked at He Yun. Lionheart is dead. Lu Yi killed him with one strike. The news came from Yuan Qing, describing all the details in detail. Yuan Du was quite surprised that Lionheart couldn't survive a single strike from Lu Yi even after using the core fusion art. If Lu Yi of Three World Island really had such terrifying strength, he wouldn't have let Lionheart escape that day. But in fact, Lu Yi and Lionheart seemed to have gone through a bitter battle that day. Yuan Du couldn't understand how Lu Yi's strength could fluctuate so much. Across from him, He Yun tilted his head slightly, his gaze fixed in one direction as if in deep thought or in a daze. He didn't respond. After a long time, He Yun retracted his gaze. Lionheart is free. He was the one who planned Lionheart's death, but he didn't feel too guilty about it because it was the price Lionheart had to pay. And for Lionheart, death was indeed a release. He had no hope of sunlight to begin with, so he could only temper himself on Yu Yao. Now that his Yao core was damaged, even tempering himself on Yu Yao was an extravagant hope. Moreover, losing Purple Jade Island was too great a sin. Even if he returned to Purple Jade, he wouldn't have a good life in the future. To a competitive demon cultivator expert, this was no different than a form of torture. Therefore, he was certain that even if Lionheart saw through his plan, he would obediently cooperate with him without any resistance. By sending Lionheart to Lu Yi, wasn't he giving Lionheart a chance to personally take revenge? Unfortunately, Lionheart was useless in the end. As he spoke, He Yun stood up and was about to leave. Where are you going, fellow Taoist? Yuan Du asked. He Yun didn't even turn his head, only his voice came back. Purple Jade Island. There were too many stray cats and dogs there now. Lionheart was dead, so it was time for Purple Jade to take back this top-grade spiritual island. Yuan Du said, then what I told fellow Taoist a few days ago? I have my own plans, don't worry about it. He Yun's impatient voice came back, but he was already gone. Staring in the direction where the black cloud had disappeared, Yuan Du pondered for a moment before snorting softly. Of course, he could see the dissatisfaction and anger in He Yun's heart. Fundamentally speaking, the reason why Violet Jade Island targeted Three World Island was because of Yuan Du's secret instigation. If it weren't for Yuan Du, why would Lionheart and the others do such a thing? Wu Shui must have played a crucial role in this. As a result, Zixian's side had suffered heavy losses, while Yuan Du's side was unscathed. It was nothing more than a loss of face. It was true that his concubine Hu Shui had died, but at the end of the day Hu Shui was also Zixian's demon cultivator. Due to these reasons, how could He Yun still treat Yuan Du nicely? He had already given Yuan Du a lot of face by sitting here earlier. Yuan Du was well aware of this, but he didn't mind. As for the matter he mentioned earlier, since the enmity had already been formed, it wouldn't be so easy to resolve it, especially after Zixian had suffered such a great loss at the hands of Three World Island. They lost their top-level spiritual island, and countless demon cultivators died. Now, in order to reclaim their spiritual island, the great Rizhao had to compromise and personally pay a visit to Three World Island. Now, they still had to compensate Three World Island with 10 billion spiritual jades. Who would be able to swallow this? However, the Thousand Elephant Sea had its own rules, so no matter how angry He Yun was, he couldn't stir up trouble in the Thousand Elephant Sea. Rizhao's actions were limited here, but once he left, he didn't have to worry about anything. Some problems still needed to be solved at the source. Therefore, no matter what He Yun said, Yuan Du believed that he wouldn't miss this opportunity. The bustling Violet Jade Island finally became quiet. There was no other reason. The sudden arrival of Rizhao's demon cultivator on Zixian didn't drive anyone away, but only temporarily activated his power, but who dared to continue to stay here? Therefore, after He Yun descended on Zixian for an incense stick's time, the entire Zixian was empty. Since then there had always been a Rizhao guarding Zixian Island. Through word of mouth, everyone knew that he was a Rizhao from Zixian. The Rizhao of the Thousand Elephant Sea's native star system wouldn't allow outsiders to stay here for too long. For example, Luoxia, who escorted the Three Realms cultivators and the Four Realms cultivators over, only stayed for about half a month at the Thousand Elephant Sea before leaving in a hurry. They had no choice but to leave. If they didn't, it would be a provocation to the native Rizhao. However, this wasn't a rule on the surface. Moreover, because of Yuan Du's relationship, the few Rizhao guarding the Thousand Elephant Sea pretended not to see He Yun occupying Zixian Island. This was because they knew that He Yun wouldn't stay here forever. He was only guarding Zixian temporarily. When Zixian was ready to take over the spiritual island again, he would leave. The cultivators who didn't know the inside story were looking forward to the Three Realms Island's reaction. Logically speaking, Zixian was the spoils of war of the Three Realms Island. The Three Realms Island had to consider how to deal with Zixian. This was also the reason why no force dared to occupy Zixian even though the cultivators flocked to it. However, to everyone's disappointment, the Three Realms Island didn't respond at all. It made sense. The Three Realms Island was indeed powerful. However, Rizhao was here. Who would dare to provoke him? A few months later, a large group of demon cultivators stayed in Zixian. Among them, there were those who escaped and those who were transferred over from Zixian. The 5 Yu Yao in the lead were all late-stage Yu Yao. Zixian's demon cultivators took over the top-grade spiritual island again. He Yun left silently. 2 hours later, He Yun suddenly appeared in front of the insect passage connecting the Thousand Elephant Galaxy and Long Cloud Galaxy. Long Cloud Yu Yao, who was guarding this place, sensed his presence and quickly went out to welcome him. After a while, He Yun entered the Long Cloud Galaxy through the insect passage. Long Cloud Rizhao, who had received the news, was already waiting for him. Although Long Cloud was considered good and had its own Rizhao, it was still lacking compared to Zixian. After all, it was a top-grade domain. Zixian's Rizhao had entered their galaxy. How could Long Cloud not take this seriously? At the same time, in Yuan Du's palace on the Thousand Elephant Island, he looked at Yuan Cheng, who had rushed over to report. Which direction did He Yun go? Yuan Cheng replied flatteringly, just as Elder Ancestor predicted, he went in the direction of Long Cloud. The spies I planted there in advance have reported it. Yuan Du nodded in satisfaction. He knew that his words to He Yun that day were not in vain. Now, everything was developing as he had expected. In fact, if it weren't for the constraints of his status as a guardian, he would have made this trip himself. After all, it was better to settle some grudges with one's own hands. However, he was still the guardian of the Thousand Elephant Sea and had to stay here. He couldn't leave for too long, so he could only let He Yun make this trip. Zixian and the Three Realms Island had a huge grudge. How could Yuan Do not have one? He was Rizhao, but he had been humiliated in front of a group of Yu Yao and Xingxiu Yao time and time again. Even his own concubine was killed. How could he tolerate this? While Yuan Du was secretly plotting, the Three Realms Island was taking inventory of the treasures. There were resources worth 10 billion spiritual jades. It was a huge amount. Just the storage rings alone were used. These things were brought over by the Zishen demon cultivators from this world. When the demon cultivators took over Zishen Island, they were secretly sent to the Three Realms Island. The huge hall was now filled with a dazzling array of treasures. A few hundred cultivators who had been selected were carefully sorting out the treasures. He Baichuan stood at the side, grinning from ear to ear. The Thousand Elephant Sea was a good place. When he was in the Jade Conch, he sometimes had to go deep into the starry sky to search for spiritual jades. However, ever since he came here, the Three Realms cultivators first occupied the Three Realms Island and developed this spiritual island into a bustling place of commerce. After the two great wars, he made a lot of money. Especially this time, 10 billion spiritual jades. How long would this be enough for the Three Realms cultivators? Moreover, the Three Realms Island now had a good income every year. In the Thousand Elephant Sea, in terms of wealth, perhaps only the Thousand Elephant Island could surpass the Three Realms Island. The other spiritual islands, regardless of whether they were top or top grade, were no match for them. Junior brother Lu. He Baichuan saw Lu Yi walking over leisurely and hurriedly called out. How is it? Lu Yi asked. He Baichuan said, although I haven't counted everything, there's no problem in general. The Zishen side is still trustworthy. Lu Yi nodded. It's what they promised. Lionheart is dead, so they won't dare to do anything. Then he asked, take out all the fire elemental resources from these treasures. I have a use for them. He Baichuan smiled. Don't worry, junior brother. I've already told them in advance. All the fire elemental resources will be sorted separately and handed to you when the time comes. Lu Yi needed a lot of fire elemental resources. Almost everyone in the Three Realms Island knew this, so he Baichuan naturally took it to heart. Are there any treasures that can improve the quality of one's art source? Lu Yi asked. He Baichuan shook his head. I haven't found any for now. Although I haven't counted everything yet, there's not much hope. Although such treasures aren't rare, there are too many cultivators who need them. The supply has always been in short supply. Lu Yi had only asked casually, so he wasn't disappointed. However, as he Baichuan said, such treasures weren't rare. They weren't the kind that only appeared once every few hundred or thousand years. However, because the demand was too high, once a cultivator found one, they would usually keep it for themselves. Occasionally they would sell it, but it would also be snatched up. After all, the quality of Yu Yao's art source was directly related to her cultivation efficiency. Who wouldn't want to cultivate faster? Especially since Yu Yao's cultivation level required a lot of accumulation. Increasing her cultivation efficiency would save her a lot of time. After the 10 billion spirit jades were paid, the Zishen Yao cultivators took over the Zishen Island. The battle between the Three Realms Island and the Zishen Island came to an end. In the eyes of those who didn't know the inside story, the Three Realms Island didn't bother with the Zishen Island after taking over the Zishen Island after half a year. This was undoubtedly because the Three Realms Island was wary of the Zishen Yao star. However, that wasn't the case. The 10 billion spirit jades and Lionheart's death were kept a secret. As a result, Zishen didn't lose too much face, and the Three Realms Island gained some benefits. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 1881. After the battle with Zishen, the popularity of the Three-World Island rose sharply. Although there were more cultivators coming and going, the security was not much better. In the past, there were still some ignorant cultivators who would cause trouble in the Three-World Island from time to time. However, after Zishen was defeated, such things never happened again. This made the Three-World Island's cultivators in charge of patrolling feel bored. This was not strange. After that battle, the Wanxiang Sea's cultivators' perception of the Three-World Island changed greatly. In the past, the Three-World Island's only source of fame was its ability to defeat Baiyue. Although Baiyue was not bad, it was still a high-class spiritual island and did not intimidate others. Now it was different. Even a top-class spiritual island like Zishen was no match for the Three-World Island. Who would dare to look down on them? It could be said that although the Three-World Island was still a high-class spiritual island, its fame was not inferior to any other top-class spiritual island. In fact, it even surpassed most of the top-class spiritual islands. After all, this was the only battle to defeat a top-class spiritual island since ancient times. It could be said that this was unprecedented. The other top-class spiritual islands could not be compared to this kind of strength. The reputation of sect-destroying Yi spread like wildfire. Looking at the two battles in the three-world island, both Baiwei and Zixuan ended up in a miserable state. Yu Yao's people were almost completely wiped out and countless constellations died. If they did not escape quickly, they would have been completely wiped out. In these two battles, the three-world island's current island master, Lu Yi, played an irreplaceable role. His strength and ruthlessness were obvious to all. This title, which originated from the nine-state spirit stream battlefield, was originally a joke among the three-world island's internal cultivators. However, somehow it was spread and Lu Yi was instantly recognized as such. Lu Yi had heard of this before, because he had always left a talent tree clone to oversee the three-world island. He was rather speechless. This was a title from so many years ago, but it could actually be brought back from the dead and brought to the Wanxiang Sea from the 9 provinces. Recently he had a rare period of leisure. Ever since the battle with Zixuan ended, his main body had been cultivating in seclusion. Other than the time when he came out to kill Lionheart and occasionally went out to sea to replenish his talent tree's fuel, he basically spent the rest of his time underwater. He actually quite liked the feeling of his foundation constantly increasing. Because of the talent tree, cultivation was as simple as eating and drinking to him. It was just that in the past he had been running all over the place and didn't have the time. Apart from cultivation, he could also divert his attention to comprehend the legacy left behind by the ancestors on the talent tree or immerse his mind into the Pan Mountain saber to comprehend the various saber techniques. The harvest was huge. On this day, beneath the myriad sea, Lu Yejin guarded his mind and sensed the surging of the dermic energy in his body, causing a feeling of joy to arise in his heart. At that moment, he clearly felt that a layer of shackles in his body had been broken, and the flow of spiritual power in his body had suddenly become much faster. Even the total amount of spiritual power in his body had been greatly increased. To a cultivator, the speed at which one's energy circulated was directly related to the strength of one's attacks. The purity of one's magic power or spiritual power was also the same. As for one's energy reserves, it was related to whether one could last long in a battle with an enemy. This change was undoubtedly a sign that he was about to reach the late Moon Jade Realm. 10 years had passed since he had reached the middle stage of the Moon Jade Realm. During this period he had spent several years searching for the core of Mount Fangsuan. After bringing the core of Mount Fangsuan back to the 9 provinces, he had spent another few years combing through the core. It had only been a year since he had started cultivating in seclusion. In just a year he had spent more than 1 billion spirit jades, all of which had been used to purchase fire-type resources. This did not include the resources sent by Purple Jade Island. If he counted them, it would be even more. Cultivating with the help of the talent tree was indeed time-saving, but the consumption of resources was thousands of times more than normal. If it were not for the three-world island, Lu Yejin would not have the capital to do so. He had known for a long time that cultivating with the help of the talent tree was exchanging resources for time. However, this was the price to pay on the path of growth, so it was acceptable. Now that he was already at the late Moon Jade Realm, Lu Yejin was not in a hurry to come out of seclusion. It was rare that he had time, and the talent tree had abundant fuel, so he naturally wanted to consolidate his cultivation. Moreover, he wanted to take this opportunity to cultivate to the peak of the Moon Jade Realm. Back when he was in the Constellation Realm, in order to reach the peak of this realm, he had gone to the Yin Yang Great Millstone and used the strange power of the Starry Sky Wonder to grind his body, thus giving birth to the Flower of Body. The Moon Jade Realm corresponded to the cultivation of Qi. In other words, if he could reach the peak of this realm and cultivate to the peak, he would be able to give birth to the Flower of Qi. Lu Yejin felt that this should not be difficult. In fact, it could even be said to be very simple. Because he had the talent tree, the transcendence energy in his body was absolutely pure, without any impurities. It could be said that in his cultivation in the Moon Jade Realm, he had always been working towards the peak state. Now that his cultivation had reached the peak, it was natural that he would be able to condense the Flower of Qi. Of course, this was only Lu Yejin's guess. It should not be a big problem. Therefore, what he needed to do now was very simple. He needed to consolidate his cultivation in the late Moon Jade Realm, then slowly stabilize it. When the time was right, the Flower of Qi would naturally form. Another month passed in the blink of an eye. Under the sea, Lu Yejin opened his eyes, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. After a month of continuous cultivation, his cultivation had increased slightly. His cultivation in the late Moon Jade Realm had completely stabilized. If he continued to cultivate, of course, his cultivation would increase even more. However, he felt that something was not right. During this time, he had been recalling the process of condensing the flower of the body. In the yin-yang great millstone, the invisible force constantly ground his physical body, which pushed him to the peak of the constellation realm. This limit did not mean that his physical body could not grow any stronger. As he advanced to the yu-yao realm, the strength of his physical body would increase along with his cultivation. This limit was the limit of the constellation realm. At this level, there was no longer any possibility for him to advance any further. If the constellation realm was compared to the foundation of the upper three realms, Lu Yejun had already laid the most solid foundation. In the entire starry sky, few people could compare to him. But now, he did not have the feeling that the flower of qi was about to condense. Logically speaking, if his guess was correct, even if he had not cultivated to the peak of the moon jade realm, he should at least have some feeling. Therefore, Lu Yejun could vaguely feel that if he continued to cultivate like this, his cultivation would only increase. Was his cultivation not enough? Or was it not enough? Lu Yejun thought about it and vaguely felt that it was not these two reasons. If he continued to cultivate like this, even if his cultivation really reached the peak of the moon jade realm, he would not be able to condense the flower of qi. If he did not know the secret of the three flowers, if he did not condense the flower of the body, Lu Yejun would not have thought so much. But since he already knew this and he already had the flower of the body, Lu Yejun naturally did not want to give up halfway in the moon jade realm. The Spiritas elder Su Yuan had once said that the secret of the three flowers involved whether one could transcend. This was a secret that even he did not know. Lu Yejun was invincible among his peers in the constellation realm, and he was the number one person under the sun in the moon jade realm. If he did not reach the peak of the moon jade realm, he might lose this advantage after he ascended to the sun. He was a cultivator, so he naturally had to pursue this peak. Along the way he had been through many trials and tribulations. The talent tree had given him an extraordinary cultivation speed. Cultivation alone was no longer what he desired. He did not continue to cultivate in seclusion. Since he had sensed that something was wrong, he naturally had to think of a way to resolve it. He leisurely went out to sea and returned to the three-realm island. Not long after he returned, Baichuan hurriedly came over. "Junior brother, something big has happened." However, judging from his excited expression, this should be good news, not bad news. Lu Yejun had expected this, but he still asked, "What is it?" Baichuan said, "Didn't you sense it?" "Sense it?" Lu Yejun did not need to sense it at all. He said, "The energy on the island has become denser?" "Yes." Baichuan clapped his hands. "Compared to a year ago, the energy on the three-world island is much denser. I asked senior brother Tang, and he said that when the Peerless Island was transforming from a high-class spiritual island to a top-class spiritual island, it went through such a stage." He was so excited that his eyebrows danced. "Junior brother, do you think there is a possibility that the three-world island will transform into a top-class spiritual island?" Lu Yejun looked at him. This was not a possibility but something that was already happening. A year ago, when he started his seclusion, he had adjusted the power of the minor constellation hall. A year had passed, and the energy density on the three-world island had been increasing. It had once again walked the same path as the Peerless Island. If not for the fact that he was afraid of shocking the world, Lu Yejun could have even transformed the three-world island into a top-class spiritual island within a month. It took a year for there to be obvious results. This was the result of his adjustments. The three-world island had been developing for many years. It did not take long for the three-world island to transform from a deserted island to a top-class spiritual island. However, with the Peerless Island as a precedent, Lu Yejun did not allow the three-world island to continue transforming. He kept it at the level of a top-class spiritual island to prevent others from coveting it. However, after the battle with Zixian, Lu Yejun felt that it was time to make a change. The three-world island was now famous and powerful. It also had the backing of the Ling world. Hence, it would not be a problem for it to transform into a top-class spiritual island. After conquering Zixian, the cultivators of the three-world island stayed there for a while. Before they left, everyone was reluctant to leave. This was because the cultivation environment on a top-class spiritual island was much better than a top-class spiritual island. They could save a lot of time on cultivation. However, because they could not abandon the three-world island, they still left. However, now that the three-world island had become a top-class spiritual island, there was no need to be envious of others. In the future, the cultivation environment of the three-world island's cultivators would improve by leaps and bounds. This would be a great boost to the future of the three-world island. In the Wanxiang Sea, the various top-class spiritual islands were undoubtedly the cradles of cultivators for the forces behind them. This was because even in the top-class domains, one could not find such a good cultivation environment. This was the main reason why the Zishen demon planet could not bear to give up Zishen Island. They wanted to take back the spiritual island even if they had to pay a huge price. The Wanxiang Sea was a sacred place for cultivation given by the universe to cultivators. Guests from all over the universe gathered here. Since ancient times, this place had been one of the central areas of the universe. End of chapter. Chapter 1882. When Lu Yi first chose the three-world island, he had already planned to turn it into a top-grade spirit island. However, he was not strong enough at that time, so he could only wait for the right opportunity. Now the time had undoubtedly arrived. As he was talking to He Baichuan, a star constellation from the Green Dawn Dao world suddenly rushed over and cupped his fists. First Island Master, Second Island Master. What's the matter? He Baichuan asked. The star constellation said, Elder Tang has found something over there. He invites the two of you over to take a look. Lu Yi and He Baichuan looked at each other and rushed in that direction together. Soon they arrived. The two of them were not the only ones who had come. Almost all the Yu Yao of the three-world island had heard the news and rushed over to investigate. This was the area where the cultivators of the three-world island stayed. There was a small mountain here that was not too big, and it stretched for less than 15 kilometers in both directions. At this moment, Tang Jun was squatting on the ground in a depression, looking around excitedly. He Baichuan stepped forward and asked, "What's wrong?" Tang Jun pointed. All of the Yueyao cultivators looked in the direction he was pointing and saw that there were clear signs of energy converging in that area, which had already taken the form of a faint mist. The mist was scattered in a very orderly manner. With a certain location as the center, it radiated in all directions in a circle. The closer to the center, the more condensed the mist was. Vein source. He Baichuan's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. The others also looked excited. Previously, on Purple Jade Island, everyone had visited the Spirit Jade Mine and even plundered it. They had already seen the existence of a vein source. At that time, everyone had been extremely envious because having a Spirit Jade Mine meant that even if they did nothing, they would still have an endless supply of Spirit Jade. They had even fantasized about when they would own a Spirit Jade Mine. No one had expected that their fantasies would come true so soon. The appearance of a vein source was the most obvious sign that a Spirit Jade Mine had formed. This meant that the three-world island had truly transformed into a top-grade spirit island from today onwards. Moreover, this was just the beginning. A Spirit Jade Mine could not only have one vein source. Now that this vein source had appeared, who would dare to say that there would not be a second or third one in the future? The scale of the Spirit Jade Mine on Purple Jade was not bad. There were 10 veins, and the annual production of Spirit Jade was about 30 million Spirit Jade. What would happen to Three-World Island? Before the results were out, no one knew. They could only let their imaginations run wild. However, the Three-World Island was stronger than Zishen in one aspect, and that was the size of the entire Spirit Island. Therefore, in the future, the size of the Spirit Jade Mine in the Three-World Island would most likely surpass that of Zishen Island. The birth of a vein source meant the appearance of a Spirit Jade Mine. This was a joyous occasion for the Three-World Island. The Yu Yao immediately sealed off the nearby area. At the same time, they also sealed off any information that leaked out. This was especially true for Old Tang, who had learned from his mistakes. He was the one who had lost Unparalleled Island, so he was more worried than anyone else about the unpredictable consequences that would occur if news of this were to leak out. After making the necessary preparations, Old Tang was a little worried. We can seal off the news here. As long as we don't reveal it to our own people, outsiders shouldn't know about it. However, the changes in energy on the island can't be hidden from outsiders. The Three-World Island had many visitors every day. Even though they had separated the trade zone from the cultivators zone when they set up the formation, the energy changes on the entire spiritual island could not be faked. However, there were too many cultivators in the trade zone. Therefore, even if some people stayed there to secretly cultivate, they would not benefit as much as the cultivators on the island. There were always some smart people in this world. The changes in energy were enough to cause wild guesses. The news of the Three-World Island becoming a top-grade spiritual island could not be hidden for long. He Baichuan thought for a moment and said, "We definitely can't hide it from them. However, I don't think anyone in the Myriad Elephant Sea will dare to cause trouble for us, right?" The Battle of Zixian was the best example. Who would dare to provoke them? Tang Jun said, I'm not afraid of external forces. I'm just afraid of the local star system. The unparalleled island had been taken away by the local star system. This had always been a thorn in his heart. Lu Yi blinked and said, You don't have to worry too much about this. The three-world island now is different from the unparalleled island. We have the Che-Ling domain behind us. As long as the person from the Che-Ling domain doesn't agree, no one can do anything to us. If he had not thought this through, why would he have adjusted the power of the minor constellation hall? Old Tang thought for a moment and nodded. That's true. The unparalleled island was built by Chu Shen. Strictly speaking, it was related to the Che-Ling domain. However, Jiu Yan did not pay much attention to the unparalleled island. She only thought that Chu Shen was fooling around. After the unparalleled island became a top-grade spiritual island, the local star system was interested. They approached her and asked her to look at the big picture. Jiu Yan did not say anything. She felt that Chu Shen's ability was not enough to occupy a top-grade spiritual island. As the Vientiane Sunshine, she was willing to contribute to the local star system. The war broke out mainly because Chu Shen was unwilling to cooperate. However, the three-world island had really become Jiu Yan's disciple. In addition, after the previous incident, if the local star system wanted to attack the three-world island, they would be looking down on Jiu Yan. Tang Jun could not help but raise his eyebrows. It seems like we still have to rely on Chu Shen at the crucial moment. Sai, I've been too busy recently and neglected to take care of him. I'll go visit him later and bring him some fun things to play with. Lu Ye's eyebrows twitched. Don't be naughty. The things you do are not suitable for him. If the person in the Che-Ling domain hears about this, she won't let you off easily. Tang Jun smiled. Don't worry. I won't let him go down the wrong path. After a short period of excitement and anticipation, everyone dispersed. The place where the source of the vein appeared became a forbidden area of the three-world island. Even the local cultivators could not go near it easily. After all, this was related to the future of the three-world island. They could not be too careful. Lu Yi had just returned to her bamboo house when old Tang came looking for her. He looked mysterious. He closed the door and sat opposite Lu Yi. What is it? Lu Yi looked at him, confused. Old Tang stroked his beard. I'm thinking about how to tell you about this. Or rather, how to ask you. Just say it. Tang Jun said, then I won't beat around the bush. He coughed softly and said, I went to the Peerless Island because of your invitation. Later on, I found out that Chu Shen was not the first to occupy it. You were the first to occupy it and Chu Shen was the last to occupy it. And then? Lu Yi did not know what he was going to say. That Wushuang Island was originally a deserted island that no one cared about. According to Chu Shen, not long after he occupied that place, the deserted island suddenly came to life one day. Then, in a very short period of time, it gradually became a high-class spiritual island, and then a top-class spiritual island. Lu Yi suddenly understood what he was going to say. Some things, no matter how secretive he was, would still leave traces. When the Peerless Island became a top-class spiritual island, you were not there. Then it was attacked and occupied. When you returned, everything was settled. Then, under your instructions, the cultivators of the three-world island found the three-world island. At that time, I was very confused. In the entire Wanxiang Sea, there were many more deserted islands that were more suitable for the cultivators of the three-world island to stay. Why did you choose this one? The three-world island is very big. At that time, we only had a few people. There was no need to choose such a big deserted island. It's okay if you don't understand. Anyway, you are very reliable. Indeed, the three-world island came to life. I was very shocked at that time. I thought to myself that such a good thing would not happen to others even in a few lifetimes. How did it happen to me twice? Furthermore, when you first built the three-world island, you planned it as a commercial spiritual island. Did you really have such great foresight? At that time, I thought to myself, did you have some special ability to tell which deserted island would come to life? But after thinking about it carefully, I realized that was not right. Although the location of the three-world island was decided by you, you did not participate in the process of finding it. Do you know what shocked this old man even more? While the three-world island was thriving, the Peerless Island was in decline. It was a top-notch spiritual island, yet it had become a worthless deserted island in just over a year. Although there were cases of deserted islands reviving on the island of versatility, this was too ridiculous. How could all the good things happen to us while the bad things happen to others? This is not right. Old Tang sat there and chattered non-stop. Lu Yi did not interrupt him. He only listened quietly. He should have guessed it long ago. Unlike the other cultivators of the Three-World Island, Old Tang had experienced the rise of the Peerless Island and the Three-World Island. Although Chu Shen had experienced it too, he was still too young. He did not think as much as Old Tang. A year ago we defeated Zi Xian and were awe-inspiring. Unfortunately, this old man's strength was not good enough. I couldn't personally go into battle to kill the enemy and could only stay on this island. Take a guess, what changes have happened on this island during that time? Although Old Tang was asking, he did not wait for Lu Yi to answer, simply slapping his thigh and saying, "Hey, in that half a month the energy of this island was clearly weakening. At that time, this old master even had thoughts of dying, wondering if our Three-World Island would follow the same path as the Peerless Island. If that were the case, then when you returned in triumph, how could this old master face you? I can't fight, I can't even take care of the house. Is it true that old people are useless?" Lu Yi could almost imagine the fear and uneasiness in Old Tang's heart during that half a month. He sighed and poured a cup of tea for him. "You must have been frightened." The weakening of the Three-World Island during that time was undoubtedly because he took away the minor constellation hall. Old Tang looked at him and gritted his teeth for a while. "At least you have a conscience." He was even more certain of his shocking guess. Now it seemed that his guess was right. He had really endured for a long time. When he could no longer hold it in, he came to tell Lu Yi all this. End of chapter. Chapter 1883. Inside the bamboo building, Tang Jun picked up his teacup and drank it all in one gulp. After moistening his mouth, he continued, "In the past year, the outside world has been talking about one thing. Our Three-World Island is just too lucky. When we were fighting with Zi Xian, it just so happened that their defensive formation was unstable, and then you broke through it. If Zi Xian still had a defensive formation, then even if we had several times more soldiers, we still wouldn't be able to succeed." As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at Lu Yi. Why was Zi Xian's formation unstable? That day many people were watching the battle from afar. It seems that before the formation was broken, the entire Zi Xian island became a glowing ball. It was obvious that there was too much energy stored in the formation and it had to be overloaded. It was already at a critical point. It even needed to tear a hole to release the excess energy. At that moment, you charged in and Hu Guangting could not control the formation. The formation could only be destroyed. It can be said that the destruction of the Zixian formation was due to internal reasons. However, even if it was a top-grade spiritual island, could the energy it stored be so abundant? Then I thought of something. Before we broke the Zixian formation, you asked me some things. I told you some things, including the top-grade spiritual island, Illusory Island. The protective formation of Illusory Island had been shut down before because there was too much energy stored on the island. It exceeded the capacity of the formation. From a certain point of view, the destruction of the Zixian formation was similar to that. Kit, isn't this too much of a coincidence? It is indeed a coincidence. Lu Yi nodded. Tang Jun stared at him deeply. He wanted to say something but stopped. Finally he said, "Forget it. I am telling you all this because I want to tell you that there are many fools in this world, but there are also many smart people. Kit, you always do things unexpectedly. You also have many tricks up your sleeve. However, sometimes you still have to be careful. Three-World Island has Che Ling Jie behind it, so there is no need to worry. However, there are some things that are more tempting than a top-grade spiritual island." I understand. Lu Yi nodded. If others knew that he could create spiritual islands as he wished, and could even create top-grade spiritual islands, the current situation would be broken. There were some rules that people were willing to follow because there were no benefits that could be gained from breaking the rules. If there were, the rules would no longer be rules. In this vast cultivation world, power was king. "It's good that you understand," Old Tang said as he stood up. He had come here with the intention of getting to the bottom of things, but now there was no need to ask too clearly. "I'm planning to return to the Jade Conch Galaxy," Lu Yi suddenly said. "Do you have any arrangements here?" Now that Lu Yi had advanced to the late stage of the Moon Jade realm, he wasn't in a hurry to continue cultivating. He wanted to understand the mystery of the Flower of Qi. Returning to the local star system was just a matter of convenience. His main purpose was to visit Su Yuan along the way and ask him about the secret of the three flowers. Su Yuqing might also know something. After all, the hominid tribe had a long history. Moreover, he wouldn't have any worries if he went back now. Even if he wasn't in the Three-World Island, there wouldn't be any battles here. Moreover, he also had to pay some attention to Mount Fangtsuan in the south to see if there was anything he needed help with. There's nothing much to arrange. Take some spirit jades with you and bring more people over. Alright. Lu Yi nodded. I'll look for senior brother He later and see if the Jade Conch Galaxy needs anything. Everyone was already used to Lu Yi leaving from time to time. They also knew that he now had a special method to travel between the local star system and the 10,000 Elephant Sea quickly. As for what this method was, no one knew. In any case, he wasn't going to take the original route. The original route would take too much time. Even though Lu Ye's cultivation level was much higher than before, it would take at least 3 years for him to make the trip. After old Tang left, Lu Yi went to look for He Baichuan to ask if he had any arrangements for the Jade Conch Galaxy. He Baichuan also didn't have any arrangements. Like Tang Jun's instructions, he brought more spirit jades and resources back and brought more people over. The resources on the three-world island couldn't be used up at the moment. Since that was the case, he could feed them back to the Jade Conch Galaxy. This could also help the cultivators in the local star system grow faster. Now that the three-world island had transformed into a top-tier spirit island, they indeed needed more people to guard it. Moreover, the cultivation efficiency of all the cultivators would be greatly improved. Before leaving, Lu Yi went to the Mermaid Clan's territory under the sea to visit Wuxia. 2 days later, the three-world island had prepared all the resources and spirit jades to bring back to the Jade Conch Galaxy. Lu Yi set off on his way back. He entered the Tsangyue Galaxy using the insect path. Following the Rainbow God Lotus in the Divine Sea, he arrived at a specific location. With a leap, he entered the Soul Clan's ancestral land. Lu Yi went straight to the Rainbow Lotus continent where Su Yuan was and soon arrived. Su Yuan was no longer surprised by Lu Ye's frequent visits. In fact, he even welcomed Lu Ye's arrival. After all, he had been guarding this place all year round and it was truly boring. Lu Yi was here so he could talk to him a little. This time, Lu Yi didn't just come to borrow the insect path. He also had something to ask Su Yuan. After seeing him, he immediately asked about his doubts. Su Yuan asked, "Do you feel that even if you continue to cultivate, it won't help you condense the flower of qi?" "Yes." Lu Yi nodded. "Is your magic power pure enough?" Su Yuan asked. Only by reaching the peak of a realm could the corresponding 3 flowers be born. The Moon Jade realm was the cultivation of qi, so the purity of one's magic power was essential. "It's definitely enough." Lu Yi was very confident about this. "That's strange." Su Yuan showed a thoughtful expression. "Could it be that you're mistaken? If you continue to cultivate, when you reach the peak of the Moon Jade realm, you'll naturally condense the flower of qi?" Lu Yi shook his head. "Although I haven't reached the peak of the Moon Jade realm, that feeling shouldn't be wrong." After a pause, he asked, "Elder, you said that the 3 flowers are related to the secret of transcendence. What is transcendence?" Su Yuan spread his hands. "This old man doesn't know." Lu Yi looked at him, speechless. Su Yuan said, "The Soul Clan has a special constitution. We don't even have blood and qi. We're purely a collection of soul power, so it's impossible for us to give birth to the flower of the body or the flower of qi. At most, we might be able to give birth to the flower of God. The 3 flowers are ancient legends. Moreover, the Soul Clan rarely comes into contact with the outside world, so this old man really doesn't know what transcendence is." Lu Yi couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. Su Yuan was the first person to mention the 3 flowers to him. He originally thought that he would be able to get some answers from him, but now he realized that he was too naive. Suddenly he realized that something was wrong. "Elder, the Soul Clan doesn't have a physical body. How do we cultivate in the constellation realm?" Su Yuan smiled. "You living beings have a physical body, so you naturally have to cultivate your body. The Soul Clan doesn't have a physical body, so you have to cultivate your soul power to the end. In this world, the Soul Clan isn't the only one without a physical body. There are other races and each race has their own way of adapting. You can't say that not having a physical body will cut off the path of cultivation." Lu Yi understood. "This old man will ask the clan head about your question later. Perhaps he'll have some answers." Su Yuan changed the topic. "Where is the clan head?" "The clan head hasn't been in the ancestral land recently. I don't know when he'll return." Lu Yi said helplessly, "All right then. If you have an answer, please remember to tell me, Elder." Lu Yi couldn't get any substantial answers from Su Yuan, so he could only leave and continue forward. Using the Starry Sky Pool, Lu Yi jumped into the Jade Conch Galaxy and headed in the direction of the 9 states. Su Yuan didn't have an answer, so he could only rely on the humanoid race. If even the humanoid race didn't have an answer, then Lu Yi could only ask the reincarnation tree for help. In the entire starry sky, if there was anyone who was the most knowledgeable, it would undoubtedly be the reincarnation tree. Back then, it was Elder Shu who secretly instructed him to go to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone before Yu Yao ascended. However, Elder Shu didn't tell him everything because Lu Ye's cultivation was still insufficient at that time. Elder Shu wasn't sure if he could reach that step. From this point, it was obvious that Elder Shu knew the secret of the 3 flowers. Perhaps he could figure out where his current problem was. Lu Yi still had a mark of the reincarnation tree on his hand. Once activated, he could be teleported to the reincarnation tree. However, this thing was extremely rare and would disappear after using it. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Lu Yi didn't want to use it. The last time he was able to get it, it was because Elder Shu took the initiative to call him over for help. Therefore, before he left, he added another mark. If he went over for personal matters, he wouldn't be able to get this preferential treatment. After returning to the 9 states, Lu Yi went straight to the Guardian Hall and found the current Guardian. Then he took out a large pile of storage rings that he brought back. This wasn't the first time he brought back cultivation resources from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It was just that he didn't bring back this many last time. These resources weren't all for the cultivators of the 9 states. After leaving a portion here, the rest needed to be sent to the Greenly Dao world and the Jade Conch world. He didn't need to deal with this. Now, in the galaxy, the cultivators of the 3 realms still came and went frequently. Naturally, the matter of sending resources to the other 2 realms would be handled by others. However, Lu Yi considered that the star constellation's speed was a little slow, so he planned to send his blood servants to make a trip. Xiang Yinyu and Ding Beifeng had been left in the 9 states. After sending the resources, he could bring back the cultivators from the other 2 realms. It shouldn't take too much time. This time, he planned to bring 1,500 people to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The quota would be divided equally between the upper 3 realms. In other words, each realm would send out 500 people. It wasn't that he didn't want to bring more people, but the size of the Little Flower realm was limited. It couldn't accommodate so many people. After so many years, Lu Yi was going to bring people to the 10,000 Elephant Sea again. When the news spread, the 9-state star constellation was filled with anticipation. None of them knew what the 10,000 Elephant Sea was like. Because no one had been there before, their understanding of the 10,000 Elephant Sea was only limited to a few words from Lu Yi. However, from the fact that Lu Yi could bring back so many resources from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, many cultivators imagined that the 10,000 Elephant Sea must be a treasure land. Although there was no lack of cultivation resources in the 9 states, the star constellation's enthusiasm for the 10,000 Elephant Sea was still very high. Therefore, after the news spread, all the star constellations in the 9 states gathered at the Guardian Hall. End of this chapter. Chapter 1884. Minuscule Mountain, Immortal Spirit Peak inside the palace. The clear and smooth surface of the mirror reflected the woman's languid face, and her tender skin was faintly flushed. Lu Yi stood behind Su Yuqing holding a jade comb and combing her hair. The woman's body was clearly a little weak, and she leaned lazily on the chair with a smile on her face. She softly said, "I went to the Thousand Hills tomb to take a look. That place is indeed very strange. I tried to destroy the mounds you mentioned, but as soon as I did, the giant blue bird you mentioned appeared out of nowhere. It just looked at me like that and I didn't dare to act rashly anymore." Before Lu Yi left last time, he had asked Su Yuqing to go to the Thousand Hills tomb to take a look. The wonderful things in the mounds were good things that could directly improve the foundation of a domain. Sunshine's speed was undoubtedly very fast, so in just over a year, Su Yuqing had already made a round trip. If it weren't for the blue bird, with Sunshine's ability, it wouldn't be a problem for Su Yuqing to break open the mounds and take some things out. Unfortunately, the blue bird seemed to treat the mounds as its own exclusive property and didn't allow others to touch them. Fortunately, the blue bird didn't attack Su Yuqing, otherwise Su Yuqing might not be its opponent. Then forget it. Lu Yi nodded. "Thank you for making this trip." Su Yuqing shook her head. "I had nothing to do anyway. As for the secret of the 3 flowers, you can go to the Resting Abyss Pavilion to take a look. Perhaps there are some records there." "Even you don't know?" Lu Yi didn't stop and asked. He didn't get any answers from Su Yuan, so he thought Su Yuqing would know something, but it turned out that she didn't know either. Su Yuqing said, "I've heard of it before, but that's all because the fellow Taoist who talked to me about it also didn't have a deep understanding of it. I only know that it's a very ancient technique that can even be traced back to the Desolate Era." Lu Yi understood. Then let's go to the Resting Abyss Pavilion to take a look. When he first mistakenly entered the minuscule mountain, he stayed in the Resting Abyss Pavilion for a long time and copied a large amount of information from the starry sky to bring back to the 9 provinces. However, at that time, his identity was a guest and his cultivation wasn't high, so the upper floors of the Resting Abyss Pavilion were not open to him. What was stored in there was classified information. While speaking, Lu Ye's movements stopped. What happened? Su Yuqing was puzzled. She raised her head and looked at the mirror, only to see Lu Ye's head lowered. His eyes were like leeches, greedily looking at the full curve. From Lu Ye's point of view, the curve of her body was perfect after the clothes were tightly wrapped around her body. One couldn't help but have the urge to destroy this perfection. You. Su Yuqing looked up, her eyes becoming hazy. She couldn't help but sigh softly as she buried her head into his broad chest. 2 days later, Lu Yi entered the Resting Abyss Pavilion in high spirits. A mere Rizhao is nothing more than this. It was not even 30% of Hua Xi's power. Thinking about the days he spent with Hua Xi, he was the one whose legs were weak. But then again, in the past he was not strong enough and his cultivation was not high enough, so it was understandable. But now things were different. How could the title of the #1 person under the sun be undeserved? That was something that had been achieved by killing with every blade. Behind that fame were the mountains of corpses and seas of blood of purple jade's Yao cultivators. He just didn't know when Hua Xi would be able to break through her seal. Lu Yi held back his anger. Sooner or later, he would let that poisonous woman experience his power. After entering the Resting Abyss Pavilion, Lu Yi went straight to the upper few floors and checked the jade slips one by one. Originally, he wanted to see if there were any records about the mystery of the 3 flowers, but after coming here he found that many of the information recorded here were very interesting, so he calmed his heart and began to investigate. As his cultivation grew higher, he encountered more things. Perhaps some of the information recorded here would play an unexpected role. Days passed by. Lu Yi was immersed in the Resting Abyss Pavilion, unable to extricate himself. Until one day he casually picked up a jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. The words, "Mystery of the 3 flowers," suddenly appeared before his eyes. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, then his spirit was shaken. He hurriedly and carefully checked it. It had to be said that the information recorded in the Resting Abyss Pavilion was very complicated. Some of the jade slips were also very old, so sometimes the information recorded in the jade slips was incomplete. Previously, Lu Yi had encountered many such jade slips. This jade slip about the mystery of the 3 flowers was undoubtedly very old, and the information recorded in it was indeed incomplete. However, the missing parts were not too important and could be more or less filled in with a little deduction. Lu Yi quickly finished reading it and immediately showed a disappointed expression. This was because even this jade slip only recorded the mystery of the 3 flowers and did not have anything too in-depth. As for the mystery of transcendence, after a cultivator condensed the 3 flowers, there was not a single word left. Through the records of this jade slip, Lu Yi learned of one thing, which was what Su Yuqing had mentioned before. The mystery of the 3 flowers was indeed a very ancient method. This method could be traced back to the desolate antiquity era. Because the cultivation of the cultivators of that era was still in the groping stage, it was unknown which almighty figure discovered the Tao of condensing the 3 flowers and spread it. Moreover, the environment of that era was very suitable for the circulation of this method, so many cultivators in that era tried to condense their own 3 flowers. Of course, it was unknown how many people succeeded. However, even if they only succeeded in a certain realm, it would be of great help to the improvement of a cultivator's strength. However, as time passed and the cultivation environment changed, the mystery of the 3 flowers was gradually eliminated. This was because this method had 2 strict requirements for a cultivator. Every realm in the upper 3 realms had to be perfect. Therefore, at this stage, not many cultivators knew about the mystery of the 3 flowers because it was something that had been eliminated many years ago. When he saw this, Lu Yi was shocked. Was it appropriate for him to pick up something that had been eliminated in ancient times and cultivate? Since it had been eliminated, it meant that it did not fit the current era. However, after calming down and thinking about it carefully, regardless of whether it was something that had been eliminated by the era or not, he had actually benefited from it. This was because the process of condensing the 3 flowers was the extreme polishing of one's realm. Take the constellation realm as an example. Under the circumstances that he could advance to the Yu Yao realm, Lu Yi did not choose to do so. Instead, he listened to the reincarnation tree's advice and went to the Yin Yang Great Millstone to condense the flower of the body. This allowed his physique to reach the extreme in the constellation realm, becoming stronger than before and having a more solid foundation. Therefore, at the same cultivation level, his strength, speed, and reaction time were stronger than other cultivators. Moreover, based on the reincarnation tree's knowledge and experience, if this thing was really not good enough, why would it suggest that he go to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone? Thinking of the reincarnation tree, Lu Yi could not help but think of the divine light he had obtained from the Alpha Origin realm when he advanced to the constellation realm. The cultivation of the three flowers was an ancient method, and the divine light he had obtained when he advanced to the constellation realm was nurtured in an extremely ancient environment. Thinking about it this way, could the elimination of the three flowers ancient method be related to the fact that cultivators could no longer obtain the ancient divine light? He had obtained it and advanced to the constellation realm because of it. Was that why the reincarnation tree wanted him to walk this ancient path? Lu Yi could not judge what old Shu was thinking, but from the various things he had grasped at the moment, his speculation was probably correct. He gradually understood one thing. Those cultivators who had won the battle for the Spirit Sea in the Alpha Origin realm should have the qualifications to condense the three flowers. However, they only had the qualifications. As for whether or not they could condense the three flowers, that would depend on their own efforts and luck. The Jade Slip also mentioned another piece of information. If a cultivator wanted to condense their own three flowers, they had to perfect every detail in every realm. Only then could they truly reach the pinnacle. Taking the constellation realm as an example, Lu Ye's physique was extremely strong and condensed. Moreover, because he had refined a lot of blood ancestors' sacred blood, his chi and blood were extremely powerful. Even so, he had not reached the pinnacle. It was only when he went to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone and was ground by that mysterious, invisible force that his chi and blood soared. These were the details. What details could be polished in the Moon Jade realm? Lu Yi could not help but fall into deep thought. After a cultivator advanced to the Moon Jade realm, their spirit chi would turn into dermic power. He had no problem with dermic power having to be pure enough. The dermic power's circulation speed had to be fast enough? He felt that he had no problem with this either. Large enough reserves? This was directly related to one's realm. Moreover, he had already eliminated this factor because even if he continued to cultivate in the Wanxiang Sea, it would only increase the amount of dermic power in his body. However, apart from a cultivator's own dermic power, what else could be polished in the Moon Jade realm? As he pondered, Lu Ye's expression suddenly froze as he thought of something. Magic source. That's right. When a cultivator advanced from the constellation realm to the Moon Jade realm, it was not only the transformation of spirit chi into dermic power, but also the transformation of magic source. It was precisely because a magic source had been born that magic power existed. This was undoubtedly the most important detail in the Moon Jade realm that needed to be polished. He had not noticed this until now. Even though he was unable to verify it, Lu Yi felt that he was on the right track. If he wanted to condense a flower of chi in the Moon Jade realm, the quality of his magic source had to reach a certain level. Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. He had worked hard in this area before, but the results had been minimal. Moreover, his cultivation mainly relied on the power of the innate skill tree, so the quality of his magic source did not affect the efficiency of his cultivation. Thus, after his efforts had not yielded any results, he had not put much effort into it. Although the quality of his magic source was not very high, it was not low either. It was fine as long as it was sufficient. Among the spoils of war he had obtained from Purple Jade Island, there was a treasure that could increase the quality of his magic source. He had directly sent it to Che Ling Realm, and Antu had been very satisfied with it. If the quality of one's magic source was really related to condensing a flower of chi, then it was a big problem. What he needed was not just one or two treasures that could increase the quality of his magic source, but many. Holding the jade slip, Lu Yi could not help but smack his lips. If he went to Che Ling Realm to ask Antu for that treasure after returning to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, Antu might kick him out. Moreover, asking for something that he had already given away was not very appropriate. Lu Yi had never thought that there would be a day when he would have to worry about cultivation resources. With the current wealth of the Three-Realm Island, he did not lack spirit jades, and he also had a large reserve of spirit crystals. If he needed any spirit pills, he only had to ask his second senior martial sister. With the help of a pill gourd, she could easily refine them. If he lacked any treasures, he could just buy them with spirit jades. Only this rare item that could increase the quality of one's magic source was something that money could not buy. What should he do? Lu Yi could not help but fall into deep thought. No matter how he thought about it, he could not come up with a good solution unless he gave up on condensing the flower of qi. However, if he did that, then condensing the flower of the body would be meaningless. Moreover, he also wanted to know what the secret of transcendence was after condensing the three flowers. Moreover, the process of condensing the three flowers was a process of tempering oneself to the limit. He did not want to give up. Even if he did not succeed in condensing the flower of qi in the end, this kind of tempering would only benefit him. End of chapter. Chapter 1885. A few days later, Lu Yi left the Resting Abyss Pavilion and returned to the Immortal Spirit Peak to inform Su Yuqing of his plans. You want to go to the Azura Field? Su Yuqing looked at him in surprise. Why did you suddenly have this idea? She was the one who told Lu Yi about the Azura Field. The last time Lu Yi came back, he had a headache about the future development of the 9 states cultivators. Su Yuqing had mentioned the Azura Field. This was originally a starry sky treasure that belonged to the Heavenly Azura clan. After the Heavenly Azura clan was destroyed, this treasure became an ownerless object. For tens of thousands of years, no one had been able to gain its recognition. When the Heavenly Azura clan was at its peak, they had enslaved hundreds of galaxies around them and controlled an enormous amount of wealth. Before the clan was destroyed, the Heavenly Azura clan had thrown all of their wealth into the Azura Field. Since then, the Azura Field had become one of the most important places for cultivators in the starry sky to gain experience. This was because if you passed all kinds of tests there, you could obtain something like the Azura Seal. With this seal, you could exchange for any treasure you needed from the Azura Field's treasury. The model was the same as the merit points of the 9 states in the Tianji treasury. Su Yuqing said that there was a treasure in the Azura Field, and its effect was very similar to the Azura Field itself. There was no doubt that it was very suitable for the future development of the 9 states. At that time, Lu Yi was interested, but he was not in a hurry. Therefore, he was prepared to go back to the Wanxiang Sea and advance to the late-stage Yuyao realm. However, when he returned to the Wanxiang Sea, he was provoked by Zixian until today. It could be said that even if the flower of qi did not exist, Lu Yi would still go to the Azura Field. He wanted to see if he could get the treasure from the Azura Field. If he could, then the future development of the 9 states would not have to worry. With Little 9 presiding over the treasure of the Azura Field, the cultivators of the 9 states from the Divine Sea to the Spirit Stream could do whatever they wanted. Lu Yi explained a little, and Su Yuqing immediately understood the whole story. She also did not expect that the formation of the flower of qi would involve one's art source. Treasures that could improve the quality of one's art source were not easy to obtain. There were too many people who needed them. However, there were definitely some in the Azura Field. If Lu Yi could obtain enough Azura seals, then he could exchange for the treasures he needed to improve his art source. And that treasure. Therefore, Lu Yi really had to go to the Azura Field once. After listening to Lu Ye's explanation, Su Yuqing nodded slightly. It's fine to go and experience it. Although the 10,000 Elephant Sea is lively, it's actually more of a gathering of various forces. The Azura Field is different. It's a gathering place for cultivators who are determined to improve themselves. You should be able to gain a lot of knowledge there. She did not stop Lu Yi from going to the Azura Field. Admittedly, such a journey was accompanied by a certain amount of risk. However, if Lu Yi only wanted peace, he would not have been able to make such a name for himself. A man can be penniless, powerless, but he can't be without ambition. Rest Abyss Pavilion should have quite a few records regarding the Azura Arena. Have you read them? Su Yuqing asked. Yes, I've memorized everything. Lu Yi nodded his head. Since he had decided to head to the Azura Field, he naturally needed to know more about the Azura Field. It just so happened that he had seen records about this a few days ago, so he naturally memorized it. Before we go, let's look for Senior Brother Chen again, Su Yuqing said. Why? Lu Yi was puzzled. Su Yuqing said, Senior Brother Chen went to the Azura Field when he was young, so he has the best understanding of the situation there. You can go and ask him for some experience. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. Senior Brother Chen actually went to the Azura Field before? Then I'll really have to go and ask for some advice. Although the information recorded in Rest Abyss Pavilion was rich, how could it compare to asking Qin Xianhai in person for advice? Thinking of Qin Xianhai, Lu Yi could not help but smile. I didn't expect Senior Brother Qin to have a time when he could do whatever he wanted. Su Yuqing smiled sweetly. Senior Brother Qin may seem very steady now, but when he was young he was especially high-spirited. He wandered all over Mount Fangsuan. Every time he went to a galaxy he would run out to find someone to fight. There were many times when he suffered losses. Not only was he beaten black and blue, but when he returned he was even punished by his master to kneel. Each time he would kneel for several months. Hearing this, Lu Yi was dumbfounded. Su Yuqing stretched out her hand again, and a simple long sword appeared in her hand. She handed it to Lu Yi and said, "Senior brother Chen has a good sword." When he was young he dreamed of becoming a sword cultivator. Unfortunately, the physique of my hominid race is special, so he couldn't walk the path of a true sword cultivator. Bring this to see him, he should like it. Lu Yi took the long sword and casually pulled it out. He could see the cold light on the sword's edge. It was indeed a rare sword. He could not help but recall Qin Xuanhai's appearance when he fought with the enemy. He seemed to have used a talisman sword. Sword chi filled the sky. If Qin Xuanhai was not from the hominid race, he should be a very good sword cultivator. Walking forward, he cupped Su Yuqing's face and kissed her under her shocked gaze. Then he turned and said, "I'm going." Looking at Lu Ye's back, Su Yuqing touched her cheek in a daze. On Cloud Sea Peak, Lu Yi arrived with a sword in hand. He soon saw Qin Xuanhai and presented his gift. Qin Xuanhai immediately beamed and stroked the long sword, saying, "Junior sister Su is really good to you. I've asked her for this several times but she wouldn't give it to me. Now she actually gave it to me for you. Tell me, what do you want me to do?" He also knew that one who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Lu Yi brought such a gift over, so it could not be just to visit him. They were already familiar with each other, so there was no need for such superficial things. "It's like this, senior brother. I'm preparing to make a trip to the Azura field. Yuqing said that senior brother once looked down on the Azura field and made a great name for yourself there, so you have the best understanding of that place. Therefore I came here today to learn from senior brother. I hope senior brother will not be stingy with your guidance." Lu Yi cupped his fists in a humble manner. The Azura field. Qin Xuanhai couldn't help but think back to those glorious days, his eyes filled with reminiscence. That is indeed a good place to train. Lu Yi stayed at Cloud Sea Peak for several days before leaving. Then he discovered another secret of Qin Xuanhai's. That was, after drinking a little wine he liked to brag. Things like going in and out of enemy groups 7 times, 1 against 1,000, and killing his enemies until they pissed their pants. Things like not changing his expression in front of experts, fighting the strong as the weak, and then leaving in a carefree manner. There were also a few emotional entanglements with beauties of different races. Perhaps these things really happened, but the scene was not as grand as Qin Xuanhai made it out to be. After leaving Cloud Sea Peak, Lu Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Such a steady Qin Xuanhai. Where did he go? It had to be said that some people could only truly understand them after they were really familiar with them. When he returned to Immortal Spirit Peak, Su Yuqing was already waiting for him. She took out a token and handed it to him. Lu Yi took it and examined it, discovering that it was her own jade token. There was still a trace of her aura on it, condensing and not dissipating. "I have a close friend who comes from the infinite realm. Her name is Water Immortal. A few years ago when our headquarters passed by the infinite realm I talked with her. She revealed that she wanted to go to the Azura field, but I don't know whether she actually went or not. If she is in the Azura field, if you encounter any difficulties there, go find her and show her this token. For my sake she won't stand by and do nothing," Su Yuqing earnestly advised. Feeling her concern, Lu Yi was moved. "I will remember." He carefully put away her jade token. Su Yuqing said, "The Azura field has its own rules. Although you probably won't encounter too much danger with your current strength, you still have to be careful." As she said this, she took out a red talisman. "This is something I recently refined. Take it with you." Lu Yi put it away again and held her hand. "I can't repay you for your kindness. I'm afraid I can only repay you with my body. I hope you won't abandon me." Su Yuqing couldn't help but laugh. She poked his forehead with her other hand. "Don't talk nonsense." Lu Ye's head tilted from her poke. After a while Lu Yi flew into the sky. In front of Immortal Spirit Palace, Su Yuqing quietly watched as he left. As soon as he left Fengsuan Mountain, he saw 3 figures standing outside. They were huddled together and whispering about something. When they saw Lu Yi they quickly straightened their bodies. Lu Yi looked at the 3 of them. "Have you brought everyone back?" Xiang Yin quickly bowed. "My lord, we followed your orders and went to the Jade Conch world to deliver the corresponding resources. We also selected 500 constellations from the Jade Conch world and brought them back. They are now all in the inner world." Ding Beifeng stood there stupidly. When Lu Yi looked at him, he quickly regained his senses. Same here. He went to the Green Dawn Dao world. Lu Yi nodded. Good job. Hearing the praise, Xiang Yin's eyes lit up. She said coquettishly, if Lord says it's good, then it's good. The three of us are Lord's blood servants. Naturally, we are willing to help Lord solve his problems. Your mouth. Lu Yi raised his hand and pointed at her. Is it sweet? Xiang Yin giggled. She raised a finger and pointed at her red lips. It can be sweeter. Lord, don't you want to try it? Lu Yi looked like a saint and completely ignored her temptation. Tell me, what reward do you want? The three blood servants were waiting here. Obviously they had something up their sleeves. Xiang Yin said, it's already our good fortune to be able to work for you, honorable lord. As for the reward. As she spoke, she saw that Lu Yi was about to leave. Xiang Yin hurriedly grabbed his arm. Honorable lord, we want to follow you to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Why would we go there? Lu Yi glanced at her and pulled his arm back. Otherwise, this woman would definitely hug him in her arms and refuse to let go. Admittedly, the three blood servants were all at the late stage of the Yu Yao realm. They were extremely powerful, but there were 5 Yu Yao guarding the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The three of them would not be able to help much even if they went there. It was better to stay in the 9 states. When he returned, there would be subordinates at his disposal. Take this time for example. If the three of them had not come, Lu Yi would have gone to the Green Dawn Dao world and the Jade Conch world personally. It would undoubtedly be a waste of time. Of course, asking the Yu Yao of the dwarf race to come forward was also a way, but how could that be more convenient than asking his blood servants to come? End of chapter. Chapter 1886. Lu Yi had never thought of taking Xiang Yin and the others to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Firstly, they wouldn't be of much use there, and secondly, with their strength, they wouldn't be able to obtain many benefits in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. On the other hand, if they stayed in the 9 provinces, they would be able to help him occasionally. No. Lu Yi decisively refused Xiang Yin's request. Her expression immediately became pitiful and she said faintly, if Great Lord says no, then no. Then she changed the topic. How about Great Lord bestow some more saint blood? Lu Yi knew that she was waiting for him here and couldn't help but glare at her, but in the end he didn't refuse and bestowed a drop of saint blood to each of the 3 blood warriors. With the improvement of his cultivation, the speed at which he condensed saint blood was faster than before, so it wasn't difficult to replenish it. Although bestowing saint blood to the blood warriors couldn't help them break through their shackles, it was still greatly beneficial to them. Not to mention the improvement of their saint attributes, they would be able to display greater strength if they encountered a blood race cultivator in the future. Just the improvement of their bloodline would allow them to go further on their respective paths of cultivation. Lu Yi had a big plan in mind, a plan to deal with the blood race. If he could have more helpers under his command, it would undoubtedly be of great help to the implementation of his plan in the future. This was why he didn't hesitate to reward them. Ma Shangxi's divine attribute could also be improved. Speaking of which, he was his first blood warrior and had been loyal to him over the years, so he couldn't show favoritism to one and discriminate against the other. After receiving their respective saint blood, the 3 blood warriors were all grateful. Xiang Yin said again, Great Lord, this servant has another request. Lu Yi looked at her faintly. Speak. Xiang Yin turned her head to the side and looked at the huge blood-refining realm that spanned across the starry sky. Can we go there to cultivate? She had actually made this request once before, but it was rejected by Lu Yi. Ma Shangxi had also made the same request, because he felt that the opportunity to break through to sunshine was in the blood-refining realm. Xiang Yin and the others undoubtedly felt the same. Lu Yi blinked and did not reply immediately. Instead, he looked at Beifeng and asked, how is this domain different from the blood extinction domain? Ding Beifeng came from the absolute blood world. Strictly speaking, both the absolute blood world and the absolute blood world were part of the blood ancestor's body. If the blood clan had any hidden benefits for cultivating in such a world, then Ding Beifeng had the right to speak. Ding Beifeng scratched his head. My lord, I'm not too sure either. But I have a feeling that cultivating in this realm will be very beneficial. It has a natural attraction to us blood breeds, but the blood extinction realm doesn't. Lu Yi couldn't help but raise his brows. In that case, although the blood refining realm and the absolute blood realm were both formed from a part of the blood ancestor's body, the blood refining realm was clearly different. Unfortunately, he wasn't a true vampire and couldn't sense these mysteries. Otherwise, he might have been able to figure out the whole story. After pondering for a moment, he nodded and said, "Go if you want to." Xiang Yin's eyes immediately widened. She didn't expect Lu Yi to agree so easily. She hurriedly tugged at Xian Yu's sleeve and thanked him. He didn't allow them to cultivate in the blood-refining realm because he was afraid they would really break through to Sunshine. In the absolute blood world, Lu Yi tried to let Sunshine refine his blood, but he found that he couldn't completely control him. This was undoubtedly due to the gap in their cultivation. Compared to that time, he was now at the late stage of Moon Jade realm. His cultivation had grown. Moreover, the blood kindred Rizhao who had made the attempt was definitely not someone who had just ascended. Therefore, even if Xiang Yin and the others had obtained some kind of opportunity in the blood refinement realm and ascended to Rizhao, the difference in cultivation between them wouldn't be too great. Lu Yi was very confident in this. Moreover, Minuscule Mountain was here. Even if he couldn't control it, Xiang Yin and Xian Yu wouldn't be much of a threat to the 9 continents. Even if Sunshine was a newly promoted Sunshine, he wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Moreover, how could it be so simple to break through to Sunshine? The 3 blood servants excitedly set off for the blood refining realm and soon disappeared. Lu Yi also returned to the 9 continents. At the Guardian Hall, the constellations of the 3 realms gathered. When they saw Lu Yi, they all bowed. Everyone knew that they were going to follow Lu Yi to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, so they were naturally looking forward to it. Many years had passed since the news of the 10,000 Elephant Sea had spread in the Jade Conch Galaxy. A large number of cultivators from the 3 realms had been brought to the 10,000 Elephant Sea twice. Lu Yi brought back an unimaginable amount of resources from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It could be said that the cultivators of the 3 realms had been admiring the 10,000 Elephant Sea for a long time. Anyone who had the opportunity to go to the 10,000 Elephant Sea would be excited. There was nothing to prepare. Lu Yi simply said a few words to everyone and opened the door to the Little Flower realm. The 1,500 constellations entered one by one. Half a day later, Lu Yi soared into the sky under the gazes of the remaining constellations of the 9 continents. Another month later, in the island of the 3 realms of the 10,000 Elephant Sea, the cultivators who received the news gathered here. As the door to the Little Flower realm opened, the 1,500 people brought by Lu Yi this time walked out. The scene became lively. Every newly arrived cultivator could find a familiar senior or junior brother or senior or junior sister to gather and reminisce about the past. For the time being, the excellent cultivation environment on the island immediately shocked the newly arrived cultivators to the extreme. They all knew that the 10,000 Elephant Sea was good, so they tried their best to imagine it. However, when they really arrived at this treasure land, they realized how lacking their imagination was. After this recruitment, the number of cultivators on the 3 Realms Island had reached 3,500. This number was actually not a lot, and it was far from exceeding the limit of the island's capacity. As the island transformed into a top-grade spiritual island, not to mention 3,500 people, it would not matter even if the number doubled. However, this was already the limit of the number of cultivators that the 3 realms could mobilize. Of course, this was not to say that the total number of constellations in the 3 realms was limited. However, they could not bring all the cultivators to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Each realm needed a large number of cultivators to guard it. Therefore, even if the total number of cultivators on the 3 realms island increased in the future, it would not increase by much. Most of the time, the cultivators would be transferred and replaced. Lu Yi found He Baichuan and asked him to issue a reward in the name of the 3 Realms Island to purchase treasures that could increase the quality of one's spiritual source. Such treasures were not easy to find, but the 3 Realms Island did not lack spiritual jades now. If they could not buy it at 1 or 2 times the normal price, they would buy it at 3 or 4 times the normal price. With such a huge reward, there would definitely be some gains. He Baichuan agreed immediately. In fact, many spiritual islands had issued such a reward. However, Lu Ye's desire for such treasures was stronger than any other Yu Yao. In terms of wealth, the 3 Realms Island did not fear any other forces now, except for the 10,000 Elephant Island. The 10,000 Elephant Island was a true colossus. No other forces could be compared to it. After that, Lu Yi summoned Ma Shangxi and gave him the 2 drops of treasured blood that he had sealed in advance. Ma Shangxi received them and was completely dumbfounded. With a long face he said, "My lord, is there something that I did not do well enough?" "What do you mean?" Lu Yi looked at him in confusion. Ma Shangxi held the jade box containing the treasured blood with both hands and said with a trembling voice, "Why else would my lord give me 2 drops of sacred blood? If I refine these 2 drops of sacred blood, I'm afraid I won't be able to see my lord again. Refining sacred blood was extremely risky. Ordinary members of the blood tribe could become a holy venerate if they were lucky enough to refine just one drop. Ma Shangxi still remembered how difficult it was to refine the sacred blood that Lu Yi had given him. He did not want to go through that experience again. Lu Yi immediately understood what he was worried about. Hearing his words, he comforted him. Don't worry. These 2 drops of sacred blood are different from what you know. The refining process may be a little difficult, but as long as your mind is strong enough, your life will not be in danger. Ma Shangxi was stunned when he heard this. Then he was overjoyed. He did not doubt Lu Ye's words at all. If Lu Yi wanted to take his life, he did not have to go through so much trouble. He only needed to think about it. Ma Shangxi left happily. A moment later, a tall and beautiful figure walked in. It was Lan Qiyu. Looking at Lu Yi, she said, "Senior brother, you were looking for me?" Due to Lu Ye's fame and achievements in the myriad manifestations, ordinary cultivators of the 3-world island would address him as First Island Master. Those who could address him as Senior Brother were people who were very close to him. Looking at Lan Qiyu, Lu Yi could not help but recall the bits and pieces of their time together. She was originally a weak and helpless ordinary girl who accidentally became a blood tribe holy venerate. It could be said that although Lan Qiyu was born a human, she was already a true member of the blood tribe after she successfully refined a drop of the blood ancestor's sacred blood. She could undoubtedly refine his precious blood and improve her own bloodline. This way she could go further in the future. However, if she did so, she would also become his blood servant. Lu Yi did not know whether to let her refine, so he decided to let her make the choice. Lu Yi gestured with his hand. Lan Qiyu sat down obediently. Then Lu Yi explained the special characteristics of his precious blood and the pros and cons of becoming a blood servant. Lan Qiyu listened attentively. After Lu Yi finished, Lan Qiyu understood his meaning. Without any hesitation, she said with a solemn expression, "Senior brother, I want to refine your precious blood." "You've thought it through." Lan Qiyu smiled. "No matter what, Senior brother will never harm me, right? Moreover, if it weren't for Senior brother, I would have died in the Bright Moon Cave." Lu Yi nodded. "Since you have made your decision, it's up to you." He sealed the remaining drops of his precious blood in a jade box and handed it to Lan Qiyu. He could not help but remind her, "The refining process will be a bit painful. Don't rush it. Take it slow." Lan Qiyu took the jade box as if it was the most precious treasure in the world. "I'll remember it." Senior brother can rest assured. In fact, Lu Yi was not worried about Lan Qiyu refining his precious blood. She, a human, had accidentally fallen into the blood pool. Being able to successfully merge with a drop of the blood ancestor's sacred blood was enough to prove her determination. In comparison, refining the blood ancestor's sacred blood and refining his precious blood, the former was undoubtedly much more dangerous. Lan Qiyu could pass that hurdle, so refining his precious blood was not difficult for her. This was also the reason why Lu Yi dared to give the rest of his precious blood to her. End of chapter. Chapter 1887. A star boat traversed the vast starry sky. The star boat looked like an inkfish. It was completely black and had a sleek design. It was extremely fast and invisible. Lu Yi sat cross-legged on the star boat. It had been more than half a year since he left the 10,000 Elephant Sea without a sound. After the battle with Zixian, there was probably no one in the 10,000 Elephant Sea who dared to target the 3-world island. Even so, Lu Yi could not leave openly. After all, he might be gone for a long time. Therefore he had changed his appearance. The 1,000-faced spirit inscriptions could change his appearance and even his body shape, while the pseudo-prestige spirit inscriptions could change his magic power fluctuations. Disguising himself as an early-stage Yu Yao was undoubtedly a simple matter for him. After departing from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he passed by the 1,000-turn, Shenghe, and Yuhua galaxies. The journey was uneventful. This was the advantage of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. From here, cultivators could basically reach most places in the starry sky. Even if they could not reach their destination directly, they could make a few stops. This convenience was undoubtedly brought about by the insect tunnels that connected the galaxies. It was rumored that half of the insect tunnels in the starry sky were connected to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. No one could tell whether this ratio was true or not. No one knew why it was like this, but it did make the 10,000 Elephant Sea unique in its prosperity. If it were not for the insect tunnels, even Ri Guang would have to spend a lot of time to travel. Lu Yi did not stay idle during the journey. Before leaving, he had bestowed all of his precious blood. It was a good opportunity to replenish it along the way. He was currently at the edge of the Yuhua galaxy. He leisurely took out a star chart and checked his exact location. Lu Yi could not help but raise his eyebrows. After traveling for more than half a year, he was finally about to reach his destination. Truth be told, ever since he could use the Soul Tribe's ancestral land to travel, he had not experienced such a long journey in a long time. In fact, if he wanted to go to the Azura field, he could use the Soul Tribe's ancestral land. However, Lu Yi considered that it was not too far away and decided to make the trip himself. Even if he used the Soul Tribe's ancestral land, he would only save a few months at most. According to the star chart, he would enter the Azura galaxy in a few days. Just by looking at the star chart, one could see how vast this galaxy was. It was so large that even 100 jade conches added together could not compare to it. This vast star field was the area covered by the power of the starry sky treasure, the Azura field. Therefore it was called the Azura star field. It could be said that no matter which direction a cultivator entered this star field, they would enter the Azura field and be included in the rules of the Azura field. Since the annihilation of the heavenly Azura clan until now, it was unknown how many experts had come to explore this place since ancient times, wanting to find traces of the Azura field. However, until now no one had succeeded, and even the specific location of the Azura field could not be found. There were even rumors that only those with the bloodline of the heavenly Azura clan could sense the existence of the Azura field and find it. In the starry sky, the 10,000 Elephant Sea was one of the places where countless cultivators gathered, and it was extremely prosperous. The Azura region was the same, but it wasn't as prosperous as the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Compared to the 10,000 Form Sea, this was more of a place for cultivators to temper themselves. Because of its special rules and endless wealth, countless cultivators flocked to this place. Since the Rainflower Galaxy was close to the Azura Star region, it naturally had a unique advantage. The background of the entire galaxy was very strong. Even the Sunshine Galaxy had more than 10 people there. The combat style of the Rainflower Galaxy's cultivators was also very valiant. This was because every one of them had been tempered in the Azura battlefield. They had truly killed their way out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They often had the ability to jump realms and kill enemies. Since entering Yuhua Galaxy, Lu Yi found traces of many cultivators. Moreover, they were all heading in the same direction as him. They were all heading to the Azura field. A few days later, a huge floating continent appeared in front of him. There were many traces of cultivators gathering on it. Lu Yi understood that he was about to reach his destination. He steered the star boat and flew toward the floating continent. Soon he arrived on the floating continent. Lu Yi looked around and found a secluded place. He sat down cross-legged and waited patiently. During this time he clearly felt that someone was secretly observing him. However, this observation didn't have any malicious intent. Lu Yi had expected this, so he didn't take it seriously. Because Qin Xianhai had mentioned this before. Sitting on the floating continent, Lu Yi looked into the depths of the starry sky. What he saw was no different from usual. Stars of various sizes dotted the sky like chess pieces. However, he knew that as long as he crossed this floating continent, he would enter the area covered by the Azura field. In other words, what he saw before him wasn't real. It was just an extremely realistic illusion created by the mighty power of the Azura field. The vast star field in front of them truly existed, but no one had ever seen the true appearance of this star field. There was more than one floating continent like this where cultivators gathered and rested at the edge of the Azura field. There were countless floating continents like this on the edge of the Azura field. About half a day later, another person rushed over and landed on the floating continent. The cultivator who had been secretly observing Lu Yi immediately went up and exchanged a few words with the newcomer. Then the cultivator strode toward Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his head and looked at the newcomer. He knew that the target he had been waiting for had finally appeared. Looking around, he saw that the newcomer was a female cultivator. She was not tall and wore a robe with large sleeves. She also had a cloak over it. The cloak had a hood that covered half of her face, making it impossible to see her face. A magic cultivator. Lu Yi immediately came to this conclusion. Judging from her attire, she was undoubtedly a magic cultivator. However, there was no way to know whether she was or not. In this world, it was normal for cultivators to hide their sex when they went out. It was often the case that seemingly weak magic cultivators would suddenly tear apart their clothes, revealing their strong and sturdy bodies and releasing surging blood energy. She stopped not far from Lu Yi and opened her red lips under the hood. I've never seen you before. Is this your first time in the Azura field? Lu Yi nodded. Yes. I heard it's very lively here, so I came to broaden my horizons. The female cultivator said, if you're just here to broaden your horizons, I advise you to leave as soon as possible. The Azura field isn't a place you can casually enter. People will die. Of course it's not just to broaden my horizons. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. The female cultivator fell silent for a moment before saying, since you've been waiting here, someone must have given you some advice. Let's cut to the chase. What's your cultivation level? Lu Yi immediately activated his magic power. Of course he didn't use his power this time. Her late-stage moon jade cultivation level was immediately apparent. The female cultivator was clearly surprised. She didn't expect Lu Ye's cultivation level to be so high. However, she didn't mind and only nodded. Not bad. What about you? Lu Yi asked. The female cultivator activated her magic power. Lu Yi immediately saw that she was only a mid-stage moon jade cultivator. Not bad. Lu Yi didn't have any objections. To him, it didn't make any difference whether she was an early-stage, mid-stage, or late-stage moon jade cultivator. When do you plan to enter? The female cultivator asked. Anytime. Lu Yi stood up. Then let's go. As the female cultivator spoke, she stretched out a hand toward Lu Yi. 500,000 spirit jades, no bargaining. I guarantee you the right to enter the Azura realm. In addition, I'll give you all the information I've compiled about the Azura realm. Although the Azura realm had been here for countless years, it wasn't a place that just anyone could enter. Simply put, any cultivator who entered the Azura realm for the first time would have to go through a simple test. If they passed, they would be qualified to enter the Azura realm. If they didn't, they wouldn't be able to enter. They would have to wait 10 years before trying again. This test was basically a competition between cultivators of the same cultivation level. If one entered alone, they would have to face one enemy. If one teamed up with others, they would have to face opponents of the same number and cultivation level. This kind of test was naturally not difficult for Lu Yi. However, when he consulted Qin Shenhai on Mount Fangcuan, Qin Shenhai had suggested that it would be best for Lu Yi to find a cultivator who was familiar with the Azura realm to accompany him. This was because the rules of the Azura realm would sometimes change. Qin Shenhai's experience in the Azura realm might not be applicable today. If he had a cultivator familiar with the Azura realm to guide him, he would undoubtedly be able to avoid many detours. What Lu Yi valued was the information this female cultivator had compiled about the Azura realm. As for the right to enter the Azura realm, he really didn't care. This female cultivator was undoubtedly Yu Yao of the Rainflower Galaxy. The cultivators here relied on the mountains to make a living. They often relied on this method to earn spirit jades. 500,000 spirit jades wasn't a low price, but it wasn't too high for Yu Yao either. Lu Yi didn't bargain. He took out an empty storage ring, counted out the spirit jades, and handed them over to the female cultivator. Before setting off from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, Lu Yi had not only replenished his talent tree's fuel, but he had also stored a large amount of spirit jades and fire-type resources in the Little Flower realm in case he needed them. A mere 500,000 spirit jades was naturally nothing to him. The female cultivator took the storage ring and counted it. She nodded slightly and said, "When we enter the Azura realm, I'll give you the information. Don't worry, I've brought many people in and I haven't failed even once so far." These words showed her confidence in her own strength. Thinking about it, it made sense. Lu Yi was a late Yu Yao, so he would definitely face opponents of the same late Yu Yao. She didn't hesitate at all. This undoubtedly showed that she had the ability to fight above her cultivation level. "How should I address you?" Lu Yi asked. In any case, he had spent spirit jades to hire this fighter. It wouldn't be wrong to get to know her better. Gui. As the female cultivator spoke, she flipped her hand and took out an item. Lu Yi took a closer look and was instantly amused. This was actually a twin chi-connected formation disc. Although it wasn't a formation disc that he had refined himself, Lu Yi could recognize it at a glance. He didn't expect this thing to be circulated in this place. It wasn't strange when he thought about it. This place wasn't too far from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It had only taken him more than half a year to get here. Cultivators from the 10,000 Elephant Sea must have come here to train, so it wasn't strange for them to bring twin chi-connected formation discs here. End of chapter. Chapter 1888. The twin chi connecting formation disc was actually only suitable for constellation realm battles. It wasn't really suitable for Yu Yao, because Yu Yao's movements were a little too large for the formation disc to cover. Guiyi had summoned the twin chi connecting formation disc at this moment. Clearly it wasn't because of the battle requirements. She explained, "You need to connect your chi to enter the Azura field with me. Otherwise we'll be separated." Leaping forward from this floating continent would immediately enter the Azura field's range. If the cultivators wanted to enter together, they would have to think of some methods. Relying on the twin chi connecting array disc was one method, but there was actually an even simpler method, and that was to have physical contact with each other. For example, holding hands or one side tugging on the other's sleeve and so on, they could enter the Azura field together. However, Guiyi clearly didn't want to have such contact with a strange man. She didn't know whether Lu Yi was aware of this, but regardless of whether Lu Yi was aware or not, it didn't take much effort to explain. Summoning the twin chi connecting formation disc, Lu Yi activated his own chi in tacit understanding. In the blink of an eye, their chi was tightly connected under the formation disc's influence. "Let's go!" Guiyi shouted and took the lead to leap forward. Lu Yi followed closely behind. With a single step the stars shifted. The originally deep starry sky instantly disappeared. The entire process was so fast that Lu Yi didn't even notice it at all. By the time he reacted, he was already standing on a colorful cloud. The sun shone brightly in the sky, and its bright light spread out. His entire body felt warm. Even though Lu Yi had already received various pointers from Chen Xianhai, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise at this moment. He subconsciously activated the insight spirit mark to enhance his eyes, wanting to spy on his surroundings. Looking around, everything around him was incomparably real. There was no trace of falsehood at all. This was clearly a test that cultivators who had just entered the Azura field had to go through. No one knew whether this scene was real or fake. Chen Xianhai had mentioned before that some people felt that these scenes were illusory, created by the mysterious power of the Azura field. However, no cultivator at the current stage could see through this. However, there were also people who felt that these scenes were real. That was because the Azura field was incomparably vast. In such a vast Azura field, what kind of scene couldn't be found? When cultivators entered the Azura field, they would be transported to a certain region, and this region would become a training ground for them. But regardless of whether these scenes were real or fake, what Lu Yi was facing now was to obtain the qualifications to truly enter the Azura field. Soon, he saw that there was another colorful cloud dozens of miles away. There were also two figures standing there. One of them was looking around curiously just like him. In the Azura field, all the living creatures you see are divided into two types. One is the living creatures of this era who are still alive like you and me. The other is the projections left behind by the living creatures of the past in the Azura field. They are called shadows. You will encounter many shadows in the future, but no matter how real these shadows appear, they are not living creatures in the end, so you don't have to worry about killing them. Guiyi's voice suddenly sounded. After accepting Lu Ye's spirit jades, she did her job well and explained some basic information to Lu Yi. Lu Yi naturally knew about this. Since ancient times, countless cultivators had ventured into the Azura field. Every cultivator would leave behind their own traces in the Azura field. When necessary, the mysterious power of the Azura field would condense these traces into shadows, becoming the whetstones for the cultivators to temper themselves. Therefore, in the Azura field, it was not surprising to see races that had been extinct for God knows how many years, because these were the shadows left behind by the cultivators of those races who came here to temper themselves a long time ago. It could even be said that Lu Yi might encounter Chen Xuanhai's shadow here. In a few more years, someone might encounter Lu Ye's shadow. The techniques that the shadows could use were all techniques that those cultivators had used in the Azura field. However, these shadows were too real, and before they were killed, no one could accurately distinguish between them. Even if cultivators were of the same realm, there was a huge gap in strength. Therefore, the various trials and tempering in the Azura field actually had a lot to do with luck. If one encountered a shadow that was strong on the outside but weak on the inside, one could naturally easily win. If one encountered a shadow that was a peerless genius that only appeared once in 10,000 years, one could only admit that one was unlucky. Lu Yi looked at the two opponents over there and asked, "Are those two shadows?" Guiyi said indifferently, "You'll know after you kill them. Choose one, I'll help you after I've dealt with my opponent. There's no need to hide. In the first trial you have to do your best to perform. Whether you kill the enemy or not is secondary. As long as you perform well enough, You can still obtain the qualifications to enter the Azura field. Of course, if you can win, then you can definitely enter. Lu Yi could not help but tilt his head to look at Gui Yi. Although he had already experienced this female cultivator's strong confidence before, he really did not expect her to be confident to this extent. This was usually what he said to others. As the two spoke, the two cultivators over there were also sizing them up. One of them, a middle-aged man with a white face and no beard, could not help but frown, feeling rather helpless. He came in alone, and did not expect that the Azura field would arrange such a trial. His opponents were two people, and it was very likely that they were in cahoots. However, he was not familiar with his companion at all. He could not even deduce whether this companion of his was a shadow or not. It was pointless to ask because the shadow would not admit it. Not only did the shadow master all the techniques that the original cultivator had used in the Azura field, even his personality and preferences were exactly the same. 2 against 2, it was very fair. Leave that woman to me. You can deal with the remaining one, no problem, right? His companion suddenly spoke up. What could the middle-aged man say? He could only nod and say, no problem. As soon as he finished speaking, his companion had already charged out. On the other side, Lu Yi saw that the enemy had taken the initiative to attack. He sensed for a moment, and discovered that the first to attack was a Moon Jade middle-stage cultivator. He said, I'll leave this one to you. Gui did not say a word and directly charged forward. In the blink of an eye, the two figures were locked in a fierce battle. Lu Yi also stepped forward, leisurely walking towards his other opponent. Dozens of miles away, the middle-aged man also strode forward. However, he had only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped. His expression became surprised and uncertain. Then 2 streams of light flashed in his eyes. He used his eyesight to look and became more and more suspicious. When Lu Yi reached the middle, he could no longer hold back and cupped his fists from afar. May I ask if you are fellow Taoist Lu of the Three Realms Island? It couldn't be, right? He had spent so much effort to come to the Azura field, so how did he end up encountering this murderous idiot? It couldn't be so coincidental, but no matter how he looked at it, he felt that the person in front of him was the one who had defeated Zixuan. That day, when the great Zixuan formation was broken, and Bao Yuyu and Hu Guang were killed one after another, he had witnessed it with his own eyes from afar. At that time he had been extremely shocked. It was precisely because he had witnessed Lu Ye's terrifying strength that he had the idea of coming to the Azura field to temper himself, because he felt that his potential had not been completely unearthed yet, and he still had room for improvement. It couldn't be, this definitely couldn't be that murderous idiot. But it seemed like it, and the sect exterminating leaf was a weapon cultivator, and he carried a long saber. This opponent was also one. Hearing this person's question, Lu Yi couldn't help but stop. He glanced at the other party but he didn't recognize him. There were many Moon Jade middle stage cultivators on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and he didn't have Old Tang's social skills, so how could he know so many people? However, if he could recognize him at a glance, then he undoubtedly came from the 10,000 Elephant Sea like him, and perhaps he had seen him somewhere before. So this person wasn't a shadow. He nodded and said, that's right. The middle-aged man's vision instantly darkened, and he felt as if something was stuck in his chest. He only felt that he was really unlucky. After a series of thoughts, he finally sighed and said, since fellow Taoist Lu is here, then I won't be presumptuous. Although he had the strength of a late-stage Moon Jade middle-stage cultivator, Bao Yuyu and Hu Guang were all late-stage Moon Jade middle-stage cultivators. Weren't they still killed by this sect exterminating leaf with a single saber strike? He didn't feel that he was stronger than those 2 beast cultivators, and if they really fought, he might even be in danger of losing his life. He came here to temper himself, not to court death. Therefore he made a prompt decision to give up on this Azura field. It was really bitter because this sect exterminating leaf had the idea of coming here to temper himself, but as soon as he entered, he was doused with a bucket of cold water from head to toe. Lu Yi was slightly stunned, but he was also happy that the other party was giving him face. He nodded and said, then thank you fellow Taoist. When I return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea in the future, I'll thank you again if I have the chance. The middle-aged man cupped his hands in salute, and his figure quickly dimmed. It was clear that he had voluntarily given up on this trial. As a result, he wouldn't be able to enter the Azura field for the next 10 years. If he wanted to enter again, he would have to wait for another 10 years. After dealing with his opponent without shedding a drop of blood, Lu Yi turned to look in Gui Yi's direction. The battle here was also nearing its end. Gui Yi's strength was indeed worthy of her confidence. Although they were both Moon Jade middle-stage cultivators, her opponent was clearly no match for her. In just a short while he had already been beaten to the point where he could only parry her attacks, unable to retaliate at all. Gui Yi casually unleashed one spell technique after another, and her various spell techniques were linked together smoothly. Her opponent couldn't even get within 5 kilometers of her. This continued until a bolt of lightning flashed, and her opponent's entire body exploded, turning into specks of light that dissipated into nothingness. This was a shadow. It was unknown which era's cultivator had left behind traces of his travels, because only shadows would leave nothing behind after their death. After easily dealing with her opponent, Gui Yi turned to look at Lu Yi. Her gaze was faintly discernible under the hood, and there was a hint of curiosity in it. "Are you very famous in the 10,000 Elephant Sea?" She had heard the entire conversation between Lu Yi and the middle-aged man just now. Judging from the process, the middle-aged man had undoubtedly recognized Lu Yi and retreated without a fight. That was why she had such a conjecture. However, she couldn't figure out how famous a person had to be able to make a cultivator of the same cultivation level voluntarily retreat. This probably wasn't just because of his fame. So. Lu Yi casually replied. Right now he should be very famous in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Not just Xingxiu and Yu Yao, even Rizhao was paying attention to him. However, this attention wasn't all good. End of chapter. Chapter 1889. Gui Yi was not the kind of woman who was full of curiosity, so she only asked a casual question and did not say anything else. At the same time, dots of fluorescent light suddenly appeared in front of Lu Yi, and then condensed. After only 3 breaths, it turned into a triangular, pitch-black wooden tablet. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. It felt warm to the touch. This is the Azura token. Only those who possess this token are truly qualified to stay in the Azura field. As Gui Yi explained, she also grabbed her own Azura token. This was undoubtedly what the two of them had obtained after passing the test. The Azura token has many uses in the Azura field. The Azura tokens you obtain from your various experiences in the Azura field will be recorded and used to exchange for resources. Do not lose them or you will be immediately expelled from the Azura field. The price is that you will not be allowed to enter for 10 years. Lu Yi nodded. I understand. Immerse your mind in it and leave your name and origin on the Azura token, Gui Yi added. Lu Yi immediately did as instructed. Soon a few words appeared on the glossy Azura token. One side was engraved with the words 9 Heavens Realm, and the other side was engraved with the words Lu Yi. This time he did not use a fake name. Although he could do so, as the Azura field did not prohibit this, there was no need to. In the past he had done so mainly because he was not strong enough. Now that Yu Yao was at the late stage, she was also a prominent figure in the starry sky, so there was no need to hide. Gui Yi also engraved her name and origin on her Azura token, confirming that this was not the first time she had entered the Azura field. She had probably experienced this many times before. There was a sudden crashing sound. Lu Yi looked around and saw that the scenery around him had suddenly shattered like a mirror, countless cracks appearing and then collapsing. Heaven and earth changed again, and by the time Lu Yi regained his senses, he had returned to the starry sky. Below him was a huge realm, and the rich aura of the realm rushed towards him. Gui Yi stood beside him and explained dutifully, "This is the heavenly Azura realm. It is said to be the ancestral land of the heavenly Azura clan and also the place where they rose to prominence. However, it is now where all the cultivators who come to the Azura field gather. Almost all the cultivators who enter the Azura field will gather here. There is Xingsu, Yu Yao and Ri Guang here. However, there is no need to worry about safety. According to the rules of the Azura field, no one in the heavenly Azura realm dares to challenge the Azura." Lu Yi couldn't help but ask, "What are the consequences?" Gui Yi turned to glance at him. "Directly kill, unless you have the strength to resist the power of a starry sky treasure. Not to mention Lu Yi and Yu Yao, even Ri would not have the strength to do so." Thus, even though the heavenly Azura realm was filled with countless cultivators of different cultivation bases from all over the starry skies, the entire realm was peaceful. Cultivators did not have to worry about encountering any danger here. Moreover, regardless of the cultivators' cultivation, when they came to the Azura arena, their main focus would be on the various tests. Who would have the mood to stir up trouble in a gathering place like this? Lu Yi suddenly noticed that there were cultivators flying out of the realm, and there was more than one of them. However, without exception, all the cultivators that left the heavenly Azura realm had mysteriously disappeared at some point. Guei explained from the side. If you leave the heavenly Azura realm, you will enter a training scene. As for what kind of scene it is, no one knows. Perhaps it is a very simple one-on-one battle, or perhaps it is some special occasion that requires you to do something. If you can fulfill the requirements, you will be able to obtain the Azura seal. Lu Yi nodded. Qin Xianhai had told him this information before, so he naturally knew. Moreover, he was not unfamiliar with this kind of thing because in his early years in the 9 states, he had experienced similar things more than once. The various secret realms in the 9 states were not much different from the Azura Arena. However, compared to the past, the Azura Arena, a starry sky treasure, was leading these training scenes. In fact, these scenes could also be seen as special secret realms. Let's go in. Guei took the lead and descended towards the heavenly Azura realm. Lu Yi followed closely behind. Every cultivator that comes to the Azura Arena will have their own cave residence. You can sense the specific location of the cave residence with the Azura token. Give it a try. Lu Yi had already done so. Following the sensing of the Azura token, he led Guei in a direction. It had to be said that the size of the entire heavenly Azura realm was the first he had seen in his life. Roughly estimating, the heavenly Azura realm was probably dozens of times the size of the 9 states. This was not strange. After all, this place was one of the central areas of the starry sky. Who knew how many cultivators had gathered here? Every one of them had their own cave residence. If the size was too small, it would not be able to fit them all. As they advanced, Lu Yi asked curiously, "How many cultivators have gathered in the entire heavenly Azura realm?" Guei said, "There is no way to calculate. Some people come in, some leave, and some die in battle." However, a senior in this realm did say that the heavenly Azura realm basically maintains a scale of at least 5 million cultivators. This is the minimum. There are more, I am not sure. 5 million, and all of them were above the stars. There was even a large number of sunshine here. It was hard to imagine how powerful this force was. Of course, this was not a force that could be mobilized by anyone. If so many cultivators belonged to the same force, then it was not impossible to unify the starry sky. "I don't seem to see too many people?" Lu Yi asked again. With cultivators above 5 million stars gathered in this realm, even if this realm was extremely large, it should be extremely lively. But in fact, Lu Yi really did not see many traces of cultivators. Although the number of cultivators coming and going was not small, compared to the base of 5 million, it was still not enough. When cultivators return to the heavenly Azura realm, they usually cultivate and recuperate in their cave residences, preparing for the next trial. Unless they have to visit relatives or friends, they will not easily go out. The truly lively place is actually the Azura treasury. Hearing the Azura treasury, Lu Yi could not help but raise his eyebrows. That was the destination of his trip. There were definitely all kinds of treasures he wanted inside. He could not help but ask, "I heard that there is an Azura realm treasure in the Azura treasury. It is considered a pseudo-supreme treasure?" Guei could not help but glance at him. "You are interested in this?" "A little." Lu Yi nodded. Guei said indifferently, "I will take you to see it later. Then I will have to trouble you." Flying and chatting along the way, Guei did not show any impatience and was able to answer all of Lu Ye's doubts. This made him sigh with emotion. The 500,000 spirit jades were quite worth it because it was indeed as Qin Xianhai said. After so many years of changes, many of the rules in the Azura realm had undergone some slight changes. If Lu Yi really did things strictly according to Qin Xianhai's experience, he might suffer a loss at any time. Guei was different. She was born in the Rainflower Galaxy and would visit the Azura realm from time to time. She knew all the changes here like the back of her hand. With the various information and experience she provided, and with Qin Xianhai's advice, Lu Yi would undoubtedly be able to avoid many detours. More than half a day later, Lu Yi and Guei landed on top of a towering snowy mountain. According to the guidance of the Azura token, his cave residence was here. Looking up, he saw a thick stone door on the rock wall in front of him. Walking closer, there was a groove on the stone door that matched the shape of the Azura token. There is no need to place it. Just activate the Azura token with a little bit of your magic power and you will be able to open the cave residence, Guei carefully instructed. Lu Yi immediately activated his magic power and waved the Azura token at the stone door in front of him. Sure enough, with a profound light, the cave residence's door opened. The door did not open directly, but the stone door became transparent, like a water curtain. Lu Yi stepped forward and easily passed through the water curtain like stone door without any obstruction. After noticing that Gue Yi was not following him, he turned around to look at her. Gue Yi said, "Without the permission of the owner, no one can enter another's cave residence. I need your invitation to enter." Without waiting for Lu Yi to speak, she continued, "There are two ways to invite guests into a cave residence. One is to directly engrave the guest's name and origin into the Azura token, and then let the guest imprint it with their divine sense. In this way the guest can enter and leave your cave residence at will, no matter when and no limit to the number of times. In your cave residence the guest is basically half an owner. The other way is to activate the Azura token and imprint a mark on me. This way I will have the right to enter your cave residence once." Lu Yi understood and immediately activated the Azura token, shooting a profound light at Gue Yi. The profound light did not disperse and enveloped Gue Yi, but as she stepped in, the light disappeared. "With your cultivation there are some things that I don't need to explain in detail. Don't easily give anyone the right to enter your cave residence at will," Gue Yi reminded. Lu Yi nodded. Of course he knew this. Although there was nothing good in the cave residence, if he was disturbed at a critical moment of cultivation or recuperation, it would not be a good thing. The two of them walked into the cave house together, and soon they entered a relatively spacious space. Lu Yi took out a few strange stones used for illumination from his storage ring and placed them around him. The gentle light immediately dispelled the darkness. This cave residence had changed owners countless times, and every owner would take their things with them before leaving. Naturally, they would not leave anything valuable behind. Gue Yi's voice sounded, "Everything in the cave residence cannot be changed at will. If you intend to expand your cave residence, you will need to ask the Azura field. Depending on your needs, you will need to spend a different number of Azura seals. Of course, even if you spend Azura seals, the Azura field will not help you expand your cave residence. You will have to do it yourself." Lu Yi looked around. Although his cave residence was not too big, he did not need to expand it, so he said, "There is no need to expand it. This is good enough." Then he said excitedly, "I want to take a look at the Azura treasury." End of chapter. Chapter 1890. The way to enter Azura's treasury was very simple. As long as a cultivator was in their cave, they only needed to hold the Azura token in their hand and chant the words "Enter the treasury," or something similar. Lu Yi did this and the Azura token in his hand immediately shone brightly. Soon after, the light condensed into a door in front of him like flowing water. He stepped in first with Gue Yi following closely behind. His field of vision lit up and he found himself in a huge square. Cultivators were constantly appearing around him. Clearly they had entered this place from their own cave abodes just like him. However, the strange thing was that after these cultivators appeared, they would quickly disappear. Gue Yi's voice sounded beside him, "All the cultivators who enter Azura's treasury will appear here, but everyone has different needs, so after entering you only need to chant your needs in your heart and you will be directly teleported to the corresponding area. For example, if you want a magic treasure, just chant the word, 'magic treasure,' and you will immediately be teleported to the area where magic treasures are stored." Lu Yi nodded in understanding. Those cultivators who suddenly appeared and disappeared were obviously heading to the areas where they needed the items, so they basically did not stay here for long. Lu Yi had just arrived, so he naturally wanted to walk around and familiarize himself with this place. The square was very large, so not all the cultivators had been teleported away. In a certain area of the square, Lu Yi saw a large number of cultivators gathered. "Is that the market?" Lu Yi asked. Gue Yi turned her head and nodded. "Yes, although the Azura treasury has everything and cultivators can exchange for almost anything they need from the treasury, they still need the Azura seal. In this place, the Azura seal is the most precious thing, so cultivators have spontaneously gathered and formed a market. You can buy most of the things you need there, but the price may be more expensive than outside. Of course, there are also barters depending on what the stall owner needs." Lu Yi nodded. The market was lively, so he was not in a hurry to walk around. It would not be too late to go later when he was free. His field of vision expanded. Outside the square, there were countless large and small round pillars standing on the ground. There were so many that one could not see the end of them. Moreover, no matter which direction he looked, it was the same scene. Every one of the pillars had something on them. From time to time, the figures of cultivators could be seen moving in and out of the gaps between the pillars. These cultivators were undoubtedly looking for what they were looking for. "Look behind you." Lu Yi was still looking into the distance. Gue Yi raised her finger and pointed behind him. Lu Yi looked over his shoulder and saw a column not too far behind him, upon which was an object. It was square in shape and at first glance didn't look out of the ordinary. It looked like an ancient vessel made of clay, and was about the size of a hand. It was gray in color and pulsed with the aura of time. But when Lu Ye's gaze landed on the four objects, his eyes widened. Because a piece of information inexplicably appeared in his mind. Azura Field, a starry sky absolute treasure, the Azura Field's attribute treasure. It possesses some of the absolute treasure's mysteries. For him to come to the Azura arena this time, this pseudo-cardinal treasure was one of his objectives. The other objective was a treasure that could increase the quality of his art source. He had originally thought that such a treasure would be placed in a very discreet location, but he had not imagined that it would actually be in this plaza. It was also the only treasure placed here. Any cultivator who came here only needed to turn around to see its existence. The information that suddenly surged into his mind was undoubtedly the mysterious power of the Azura arena. Moreover, not only could Lu Yi perceive the characteristics of this treasure, but he could also know the required Azura seals to exchange for it. He silently counted 10 million, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million. He was shocked. This treasure requires 10 billion Azura seals? Although it was his first time here and he had not personally experienced how precious Azura seals were, he had obtained some information in this regard when chatting with Chen Shenhai. Every cultivator who entered the Azura arena for the first time had a chance to exchange spirit jades for Azura seals. In other words, they could offer spirit jades to the Azura treasury and obtain a corresponding Azura seal. However, there was a limit to this exchange. The upper limit for each cultivator was 10,000 Azura seals, and the price of spirit jades was 100,000 spirit jades. In other words, in terms of pure value, the ratio of spirit jades to Azura seals was 1:1. The exchange rate for other treasures in the treasury also maintained this ratio. For example, if there was a treasure that could be sold for 1 million spirit jades in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, then in this Azura's treasury, it would require 100,000 Azura seals to exchange for it. It could be more or less, but the fluctuation would not be too great. It could be said that the value of Azura seals was basically the same as spirit crystals, because the exchange rate between spirit jades and spirit crystals was also 1:1. However, very few people exchanged for it. He knew that the Azura arena treasure's value would be very high, but Lu Yi did not expect it to be so high. 10 billion Azura seals, how long would it take to accumulate this amount? Even if it was converted to spirit jades, it would still be 100 billion. Moreover, the value of Azura seals was not something that spirit jades could compare to. Soon he frowned again. Since ancient times, so many cultivators have entered the Azura arena, and there is no lack of sunshine among them. As long as one experiences enough trials in the Azura arena, although 10 billion Azura seals is not a small number, it should be enough. Has no one exchanged for this treasure? Guiyi said indifferently, what's the point of exchanging for it? It is true that it is a treasure among treasures, but in reality, it does not have much use. Even if someone really managed to accumulate 10 billion Azura seals, exchanged for it and brought it back, they would still have to take the trouble to preside over it and create various scenes for the cultivator to train. They would also have to judge the cultivator's performance during the training and give appropriate rewards. Who would have the time to do that? Moreover, it is not a true Azura arena, and the scenes it creates are unable to support cultivators with high cultivation levels. At most, it can support constellations, and that is the limit. Every cultivator in every realm has their own way of growing, and it is not impossible to do without it. Moreover, 10 billion Azura seals, even Sunshine might have to save up for a few hundred years. With so many Azura seals, wouldn't it be better to exchange for something more useful? Hearing her words, Lu Yi came to a sudden realization. She finally understood why no one was interested in this treasure. Indeed, everyone basically knew the use of this treasure, but for the majority of cultivators, this use was too weak. Firstly, it required a cultivator to preside over it in order to be effective. Secondly, its limit was not high. At most, it could only support constellations, so it was destined to not receive much attention. Therefore, even if someone really managed to accumulate so many Azura seals, this treasure would not be considered. But the 9 prefectures were different. The 9 prefectures had just been promoted to a large realm, and the cultivators in the realm did not have a complete growth system. Once the unmatched realm's corpse race was exterminated, what would the cultivators above the true lake do in the future? What about Deity Ocean? They could not really continue to maintain the confrontation between the two camps. The Azura Arena's treasure was very suitable for 9 provinces' cultivators. Moreover, 9 provinces had Little Nine, who was a natural candidate to preside over this treasure, so Lu Yi did not need to worry about anything. Only this 10 billion Azura seals made Lu Yi very worried. He could basically confirm that he had no fate with this treasure. Although he was not too clear about the speed at which he obtained Azura seals, 10 billion Azura seals was too large, so large that it made people despair. Sighing in his heart, Lu Yi withdrew his gaze. Let's go look at something else. Gui nodded and led him in a direction, not asking what he wanted to see. For someone like Lu Yi who came to the Azura treasury for the first time, he naturally wanted to walk around and take a look. The two of them left the square and entered the area with many round pearls. Every round pillar had a treasure on display, and cultivators only needed to look to know the general characteristics and uses of these treasures, as well as the Azura seals needed to exchange for them. The treasures in the treasury were dazzling, and basically anything a cultivator wanted could be found here. After all, this was a legacy left behind by a powerful clan that once enslaved hundreds of galaxies before it was destroyed. Therefore, even after countless years, the treasures in the treasury were still not completely taken away. Moreover, the treasures in the Azura treasury were not only taken out but not taken in. Training in the Azura arena was risky, and every year, a large number of cultivators died in the various trials. After they died, the treasures they carried with them naturally became new treasures in the treasury. After shuttling through the treasury for half a day, Lu Yi curiously asked, "Why are there so many spirit pills here?" This was undoubtedly the area where spirit pills were stored. There were all kinds of spirit pills here, and there were even many that Lu Yi had never heard of before. This made him feel very strange. Logically speaking, the treasures in the Azura treasury had been there for so many years, so it was understandable that there were still magic treasures left, but it was not reasonable that spirit pills could be left behind. Gui said, "These spirit pills were not left behind by the Azura clan. They were all brought in by cultivators, and some were refined by medical cultivators." Through her explanation, Lu Yi slowly understood. Participating in the trials in the Azura arena was not the only way to obtain Azura seals. For example, medical cultivators who were proficient in alchemy could accept the task of refining spirit pills in a specific place. The Azura arena would provide the corresponding raw materials and conditions for refining spirit pills, and the medical cultivator would refine them. Depending on the quality of the finished product, the medical cultivator would be rewarded with a certain number of Azura seals. Compared to normal training, this method was undoubtedly very safe because there was no need to fight with others. However, it was also risky because there was a possibility of failure in refining spirit pills. There was a limit to the number of times a medical cultivator could fail in a certain period of time, and exceeding the limit would result in the deduction of Azura seals as punishment. Hearing this, Lu Yi could not help but reveal a vexed expression. If he had known earlier, he would have brought the pill gourd in. With the pill gourd in hand, what spirit pills could he not refine? Moreover, as long as there were no restrictions, the pills produced by the pill gourd were all top-grade spirit pills. How easy would it be to use them to earn Azura seals? End of chapter. Chapter 1891. Although Qin Xianhai had given Lu Yi a lot of advice before, Qin Xianhai didn't know alchemy, so he didn't mention it because he didn't know much about it. However, Lu Yi soon stopped being upset because Gui said that this method of earning Azura seals also had a lot of restrictions. It wasn't because of the Azura field's restrictions, but because there weren't enough missions. There were too many medical cultivators who wanted to earn Azura seals this way, so they had to line up to receive missions. In this way, even if he really brought the pill gourd over, it wouldn't be that useful. Helping the Azura field refine spirit pills was a way for medical cultivators to earn Azura seals. There were many other methods that didn't require fighting, such as removing the restriction locks on storage rings. The storage rings left behind by cultivators after their deaths were basically locked by restrictions. The Azura field couldn't remove them by itself, so they could only ask a cultivator to do it. Once they succeeded, they could also obtain Azura seals. Spirit pills were essential items in a cultivator's storage ring, so even after countless years, there were still inexhaustible spirit pills in the treasury. In the Azura field, one didn't need to take too much risk. There were more than 2 ways to earn Azura seals, there were many other ways. There was also an Azura Palace, which was a place where cultivators could post bounties on their own. For example, to hunt down a certain cultivator, or to invite a cultivator with special abilities to participate in a specific training event, the Azura Palace would give an evaluation based on the difficulty of these bounties. If someone could complete these bounties, they would naturally be able to obtain corresponding benefits. Of course, in these methods, the Azura seals obtained by cultivators weren't given by the Azura field, but by the cultivator who issued the bounty. The Azura seal reward was also determined by the Azura field, so they couldn't give as many as they wanted. The only autonomy a cultivator had was to issue a bounty. This was the only way for Azura seals to circulate between cultivators. Apart from this, no cultivator could exchange their Azura seals. The two of them continued walking as they talked. Suddenly, a burst of hearty laughter came from the side. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the sound and saw a large group of cultivators gathered together. One of them was sloppy with deep sunken eyes and red eyes, but he couldn't stop laughing. "It's finally my turn to be rich, haha." Many cultivators next to him looked at him enviously. Lu Yi couldn't help but look at them in wonder. Guiyi wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, she reminded him, "Try not to come to this area in the future." "What's wrong?" Lu Yi asked, puzzled because it was obvious that someone had encountered something good. Guiyi sighed and said, "This is a place to gamble." "Didn't you notice that everything placed here are storage rings?" Lu Yi looked around and found that it was indeed the case. Additionally, the pillars here were undoubtedly smaller and thinner compared to the other areas. They were also densely packed, allowing only one or two cultivators to pass through them at a time. Placed on top of the pillars were storage rings. Lu Yi stared at one of the storage rings and examined it for a moment. Storage ring, origin unknown, value unknown. The number of Azura seals required to exchange for this storage ring wasn't much, only 13,000 Azura seals. In terms of spirit jades, it was 130,000 spirit jades. When cultivators die in training, a portion of their storage rings will be collected by the Azura field and distributed as missions. If someone succeeds in unlocking the seal, the treasures in the storage ring will be added to the treasury. There is also a portion that is directly placed here for people to exchange. Lu Yi instantly understood. In this Azura field there were millions of cultivators. There were constellations Yu Yao and Ri Guang. No matter what kind of cultivator came here for training, their life would be in danger. Even Ri Guang had the risk of dying. Therefore, the value of these storage rings was impossible to estimate. If someone used Azura seals to exchange for a storage ring belonging to Ri Guang, it would definitely be worth a lot. However, if someone used Azura seals to exchange for a storage ring belonging to a constellation, the result would be uncertain. The cultivation of the cultivator laughing wildly was not low. He was obviously a Yu Yao cultivator. Since he was so excited, it was obvious that he had exchanged for something good. This was really a place to gamble. If one was lucky, it would be easy to become rich overnight. However, if one was unlucky, the Azura seals that one had painstakingly accumulated would be wasted. Turning to look at Lu Yi, Guiyi said earnestly, "Although some people have obtained benefits here, even more people have lost their family fortune. So try not to come to this area." She was paid to do this, so she only advised Lu Yi and didn't say too much. Lu Yi nodded. His luck had never been good, and he didn't want to rely on this method to make a fortune. So, he wasn't very interested in this place. Guiyi led him around for a while more before Lu Yi stopped. "Fellow Taoist, let's stop here." The treasury was very big. If they continued to stroll around, they might not be able to finish it even after several months. Although he had paid 500,000 spirit jades, Guiyi had done her job well. There was no need to waste her time. Now that he was more or less familiar with this place, if he really wanted to go somewhere, he could go on his own. Guiyi stopped and nodded. "All right." Saying so, she took out a jade slip and handed it over. "This is the information about the Azura field that we agreed on earlier. I hope it will be of some help to you." "Many thanks." Lu Yi accepted it and put it away. He planned to read it carefully when he had time. Guiyi took out her Azura token and handed it to Lu Yi. "Let's exchange our imprints. If you have any questions in the future, you can ask me at any time." Lu Yi couldn't ask for more. In the outside world, cultivators mainly relied on musical notes to communicate with each other. As long as they weren't too far apart, they could probably communicate with each other. Musical notes could also be used in the Azura field. However, it was better to use the Azura token to communicate. This was because sometimes one party would be in a special training environment. If the other party used musical notes, they wouldn't be able to contact each other. If they used the Azura token to communicate, there was no such restriction. As long as both parties were still in the Azura field, regardless of whether they were in the same training environment, they could communicate with each other. Therefore, in the Azura field, cultivators usually used Azura token imprints to communicate with each other, not musical notes. After exchanging their imprints, Guei nodded. Then I'll take my leave first. Many thanks, fellow Taoist. Guei turned around. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly thought of something. She looked back at Lu Yi and said, "Oh right, when you're training, if you have any techniques that are suitable for medical cultivators, don't hide them. The Azura field seems to have some special treatment for medical cultivators in recent years. If you can treat illnesses and save people, you'll get more Azura tokens." Lu Yi understood. Qin Xianhai really hadn't mentioned this to him. Clearly it was a change in recent years. As for the reason, Lu Yi had no way of guessing. However, he wasn't good at treating illnesses and saving people. Killing people was his specialty. Guei left. She had her own matters to attend to this time. Even if Lu Yi didn't mention it, she couldn't keep strolling around with him. After Guei left, Lu Yi casually strolled around for a while, and he was dazzled by the sight. Even though the Myriad Sea was all-encompassing and possessed all sorts of resources, but besides the Azura's treasure vault, there was really no other place in the world that directly displayed these countless treasures for cultivators to observe and search. Lu Yi was only glad that he was a weapon cultivator. A mountain pan-saber was enough. If it was a magic cultivator who had just arrived here, they would probably see many good things that they wanted. An hour later, Lu Yi stood still. With the Azura token in his hand, he muttered something and suddenly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in another area of the treasury. The layout of the Azura treasury was basically the same. The only difference was that every type of resource was concentrated in a certain area. This area was filled with resources that could increase the quality of a cultivator's art source. There were quite a few cultivators lingering around the area. Lu Yi observed them and found that most of them were Yu Yao. Yu Yao was the only one with an art source. Xing Su did not have one. Naturally, she would not come here. Lu Yi even saw a fatty who looked like Rizhao. Although he didn't release any power or fluctuations of magic power, Lu Yi had interacted with Rizhao many times. Naturally, he had a certain level of discernment. His gaze turned to the pillar closest to him. He immediately saw a green fruit that looked like an unripe apple. Bodhi fruit, swallowed or refined into a pill to increase the quality of one's art source. 228,000 Azura seals. He looked at the other pillar. Nascent soul flower, swallowed or refined into a pill to increase the quality of one's art source. 354,000 Azura seals. There was also the Tai profound ginseng, the blue moon spirit jade. These were all good things that were rarely seen in the outside world. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. He felt that this was a really good place. He wanted all these treasures. There were more than 1,000 types of treasures here that could increase the quality of one's art source. There might even be several thousand types. Not to mention too many. As long as he could exchange for even 10% of these treasures, then the problem of his art source would no longer be a problem. There would definitely be hope for him to reach the peak of the Moon Jade realm. However, 10% of these treasures would require a large number of Azura seals. Although it wasn't a lot of spirit jades in a place like the Azura treasury, no matter how many spirit jades a cultivator had, there was nowhere to spend them. Most of the cultivators scattered around this area were like him. They were walking around and looking around. Needless to say, they were just looking around. They didn't have enough capital to exchange for these treasures. Moreover, the situation of the other cultivators was different. Although the other cultivators had a need for these treasures, they definitely didn't have as much of a need as he did. Gradually, Lu Yi discovered a pattern. In the annotations of the Azura battlefield, treasures that mentioned the word "some" were generally worth less than 500,000 Azura seals, but treasures that did not have the word "some" were worth more than 500,000 Azura seals. If there was a treasure that could increase the quality of one's art source by a large amount, then it would be worth at least 1 million Azura seals. For example, the purple dawn frost crystal was worth 1,600,000 Azura seals. This was the most valuable resource that Lu Yi saw in this area. There was also the white moon crystal that he had refined before. It was also worth 1 million Azura seals. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.